All right, I'd like to call to order this special meeting of the Solvang City Council, Tuesday, July 23rd, 6:30 p.m. Could I get a roll call?
Councilmember Clark,
Here.
Dearnos,
Here.
Johnson,
Here.
Waite, here, Mayor Toussaint.
Here. Robert, would you lead us in the pledge?
Yes, please. Stand and place your right hand over your heart. Repeat after me, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. The first item on the agenda tonight is a specialty auditor contract amendment. Can I get a staff report?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, David Gasaway, City Manager. The item before you is a First Amendment, approval of the First Amendment for a professional services agreement with Thomas Wydrow, acting as the Special City Auditor. Back on June 17th, the City Council, in a closed session, appointed Mr. Wydrow as the Special City Auditor and instructed me to enter into a short-term agreement with him for limited services in order for him to meet and interview with individual council members and develop a more robust scope of services. At your last meeting in closed session, the City Council reviewed a draft scope of services and provided further direction to finalize the scope of services and bring back a contract amendment here with the City Council for public approval. So through that negotiation and conversations with Mr. Wydrow, the draft of the First Amendment to his original services agreement is before you tonight, and Mr. Wydrow will speak a little bit to some of the provisions under the scope of services for that agreement.
Okay.
Thanks, buddy. Thank you, Mr. City Manager. For future reference, for what it's worth, it's Widrow as opposed to Wydrow. But that's okay.
My apologies.
No apology necessary. Just thought I'd let you know. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'm going to focus here on my iPad, so if I'm not looking at you directly, please understand. First off, before I get into the scope of services, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about myself.
A little further back.
Okay. Is that good?
No, a little further back from the microphone.
How's that? Is that good?
In the lobby, actually.
In the lobby? Okay. Thank you. Okay, my name is Tom Widrow, and I live in neighboring Buellton with my wife, Maureen, and our 4 children. I have 11-year-old triplets, Reagan, Jack, and Asher, and a 9-year-old son named Brody. We love life here in the Valley and have many wonderful family experiences here in Solvang, the Sunny Valley. My first job out of grad school was actually working for the American Heart Association, and the first event that I did was up here in Solvang in the park, and Bo Derrick participated for the American Heart Association in a cardiac arrest that day, and I was starstruck, but I was also thought that the Valley was absolutely, in Solvang, was a magnificent place to be. So I have that's over 25 years ago. So I'm here to tell you a little bit about myself and answer any questions you have for me concerning the position of Special City Auditor. As a 2-time graduate of UCSB with a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in American and European history, I've always had a keen interest in public affairs. I wrote a master's thesis focused on the creation by Congress of our own Santa Fe wilderness. I did fundraising and public relations for the American Heart Association before going to work for then 3rd District Supervisor Willie Chamberlain. I also had the privilege of working for Solvang's own Brooks Firestone during his terms in the State Assembly and also helping him get elected 3rd District Supervisor. More recently, I worked in Solvang office for our former U.S. Rep, Elton Gallagly. This part of my career focused almost exclusively, back a little bit. This part of my career focused almost exclusively on addressing the needs of constituents forced to take on an increasingly powerful government at all levels. I've dealt successfully on their behalf with local, state, and federal bureaucracies. The key to my success has been a positive demeanor, excellent communication skills, a relentless commitment to solving problems, and a great respect for the people, including government workers who often do great work under trying circumstances. I have also served as a government watchdog. As managing director of Santa Barbara City Watch during my tenure, we did our best to hold elected officials and staff accountable for their decisions. One of our big wins was helping to influence a 4-3 vote by that council to outsource maintenance of the municipal golf course at a savings of close to $500,000 a year. Without this decision, that golf course and the corresponding enterprise fund that took care of it would simply have closed for business and thus depriving the community of a great resource of recreation. I'm happy to report that since that decision several years ago, the golf course is thriving under private management. With this in mind, I'm proud and pleased to serve in the role of Special City Auditor should you so choose to go forward on behalf of the City of Solvang. If you look at my proposal, there's considerable work to be accomplished. Planning, marketing, communications, infrastructure, wastewater treatment improvements, the need for increased tax revenue to fund infrastructure, and much more. With my 25 years plus experience in the public, private, nonprofit sectors of our economy, I believe I can effectively serve the City Council and the people of the City of Solvang. This council has made a commitment to transparency and to replace relational politics with good public policy. The council has chosen to honor the words and the spirit of your city charter, a document in the truest traditions of our great nation. So that's I won't go into your preamble, but if anybody hasn't read it, it's a great piece to your document. It's really something. So if you have any questions about some of the specifics in my contract, some of the areas that you, through my interviews with you, have asked me to look at, I'd be happy to answer those.
And real quick, so the recommended action would be that City Council approve the First Amendment to the agreement with Mr. Widrow for Special City Auditor Services. This action was not contemplated in the budget adopted by the City Council on June 24th, so you would also need to approve a supplemental appropriation for the $52,000 contemplated with the agreement, and then authorize the mayor to execute the agreement with the city.
Okay. Are there any questions of the council of the staff report?
Well, actually, a couple of them, right. I would love to hear you read the preamble, because I think what it says is it speaks directly to what you're doing.
I'm happy to do
It'd
that.
probably take you a minute.
Thank you, Councilman Diurnis. The preamble of your city charter, which I find most impressive, says, "We, the people of the City of Solvang, declare our intent to restore our community to the historic principles of self-governance inherent in the doctrine of home rule, sincerely committed to the belief that local government has the closest affinity to the people governed, and firm in the conviction that the economic and fiscal independence of our local government will promote the health, safety, and welfare of all the citizens of the city. We do hereby exercise the express right granted by the Constitution of the State of California and adopt this charter for the City of Solvang."
Okay. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I've got another question, actually, for Dave. You made mention of the fact that this would have to be a supplemental amendment as far as funding,
Yes.
but we haven't quite finalized the budget, have we?
No, on June 24th, you adopted an operating budget. In that, under the City Council program, specifically line item 100,100,57016, which would be the professional services line item, there's insufficient funds for a contract of this magnitude, just not contemplated. And so by action of the City Council, if approved by a majority, would then appropriate the funds to that line item within the budget that was adopted on the 24th.
I make mention of this fact only because we have yet to finalize the capital improvement projects for the year, right?
There were projects that were in the budget under the discretionary spending items. That was the priority 1, 2, and 3 that was discussed at some length by the City Council and adopted. Now, we are working on, as one of your council goals, in fact, just this week we'll be doing our retreat to put the really the major workload into all of the action plans. One of those is a review of all of the capital expenditures as well as a revamp of the capital improvement plan for the city as identified as one of the primary city council goals, one of the major goals. And so we'll be bringing that back at a later date in August. That doesn't mean we'll have a revamped capital improvement plan adopted at that point in time, but we will have at least the plan going forward so that we can get the capital improvement plan onto a schedule annually, or if we go to doing two-year budgets, biannually with the budget so that it's adopted at the same time, as opposed to the prior practice where the city was doing the capital improvement program after they were adopting the budget.
The reason why I bring this up is because I have serious doubts about the revenue projections, and I don't think they're going to be as robust or rosy as we had seen back in June. And if they're not, if they're cut in half, and for example, in terms of the TOT revenue, then what we presume to be a positive net operating income is probably going to be negative, and that's my biggest concern here. So I wanted to make sure that that budget had not been finalized, that there's still time to make adjustments based on perhaps a more realistic projection of income.
Chris, I need you to relate this back to the special city auditor. The point is, yes, the budget will get brought back up if this is approved. So
My point is, I think we need to have this city auditor because we need to look into things like the budget process and how do we make that more effective, and how do we incorporate and include the rest of the community.
So I'll have you save that
Discussion.
for deliberations on the topic, but for right now, I just need you to stick to the questions of the staff report. Are there any other questions of the staff report? Okay. With that, we'll move on to public comment. Our first speaker is Hans Deuce.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. I'm Hans Deuce. I don't have a dog in this fight since I'm up in Santa Maria. However, I sat as a person of responsibility for almost 9 years up on that dais, up to about 2 years ago. And I have gotten a lot of calls from friends and supporters down here. This, I feel, is a very dangerous situation. Putting one person, omnipotent, answering only to you. Your city manager is bypassed by him. I haven't had the chance to read all the way through this description, but to me, it looks dangerous. One person having all the power is no good. Like you, Mr. Clark, I'm a history buff. I'm reading a very interesting book right now. It's called Appeasement. It's,
Neville Chamberlain.
yes. And I do believe that history repeats itself. I'm seeing parallels. On a very different scale, but I'm seeing parallels right here. Don't let one person have that power. Is basically bringing in Göring and Himmler.
Seriously?
Sir, Chris.
You've got to be.
Gay Infante? And I'll just remind members of the public, please address the council as entirety, not individual council members.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. Excuse me, I'm Gay Infante and a resident of Solvang, and I'm concerned about what's going on here. At a recent closed session, City Council appointed a special auditor in accordance with Article 7 of our city chapter. And this individual is going to be a consultant. To my knowledge, consultants aren't hired in closed session. Neither does the city charter require it. In the initial consulting agreement, the consultant was tasked to develop his own scope of work. Now his contract is being amended to include his recommended specific tasks and funding of $52,000. Normally, when Solvang acquires a new consulting service, a statement of work is prepared by the city, incorporated into a request for proposal, so qualifying consulting firms can respond with proposals. Subsequent to evaluation of the proposals received, a contract is awarded to the most qualified firm or person based on the combination of capability, experience, and cost, which is known as the Best Value Award. This process ensures that government entities can't commit public funds without a thorough vetting of a consultant's qualifications and experience for the work and analysis of the reasonableness of the cost to complete the required work. This is a standard process followed by government entities, in which I'm very familiar with since I had responsibility overseeing contracting professionals for 35 years in government contracting firms. This process wasn't used to engage a special auditor, so I wonder how the council determined whether he has the necessary qualifications and experience and skills to develop the required work scope and to perform the work it includes. Seems to me this was all done without giving the city manager and staff a chance to evaluate and recommend changes and improvements to the city's policies and processes. Whether the council agrees or not, this special auditor will be usurping the city manager's responsibilities and role. It's also interesting to me that the list of tasks recommended by the consultant doesn't really reflect the effort necessary to accomplish the council goals developed during the recent public workshop. The consulting agreement, as it's amended, says that the city manager will simply be tasked by the council to implement the consultant's recommendations, and that will obviously interfere with the effort that's going on right now to have their offsite and determine how they're going to meet your council goals. So I'm recommending to you tonight that you don't amend this contract. Instead, give the consultant's recommendations developed during the initial phase of his agreement to the city manager to execute the recommended tasks and make any further reports and/or recommendations to you of the council, and save the city $50,000. Thank you.
Kim Jensen. Excuse me, no, I need to maintain decorum in here. Please, no clapping.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. Before you vote tonight on Tom Woodrow, can you tell us who is Tom Woodrow? Number one, does Tom Woodrow have any connections or ties to any council person presently on the dais? Or is he correctly vetted and chosen because he's an outside independent body, as most city councils are expected to agree and affirm? Number two, is Tom Woodrow a CPA? If not, what made him so highly qualified over the other vetted candidates? And what were Mr. Woodrow's results on previous performance projects for other cities that made you believe he was the right candidate for the position? Number three, is this the same Tom Woodrow whose top campaign pledge in 2014 was to defund the benefits of the Buellton Visitors Bureau because there was no reason to market tourism in Buellton? The Buellton constituents, by the way, gave their answer by not electing him to the dais that year. Number four, finally, is this the same Tom Woodrow who, along with Daniel Johnson and Chris DeJernis, went to the Solvang Visitors Information Center on Tuesday, July 9th, the day after the canceled SCV contract, to see how the employees were feeling, asking questions about typing job outlines, and even having lunch once received, stating the council had to do what they had to do because they had a threat of litigation. By the way, Mr. Johnson and Mr. Jernis did stay outside, but only until their picture was taken, and then they left. My question is, for $250 to $250 an hour as a special auditor, is Mr. Woodrow the correct candidate for this position? Or is this another example of wise decision-making by our city council, i.e. their usage of time, our money spent conservatively, and maintaining a proper decorum while representing this great city of Solvang? Please feel free to answer these questions during the discussion phase of Mr. Woodrow's contract, or not.
Ed Skid.
Thank you, Mayor Toussaint. I had three questions that came up as I read the amendment to the contract. The first one was, what was the scope of the contract. And in the amendment, the first thing I thought of after reading what Mr. Woodrow was going to be investigating was he was investigating every single thing in the city with the exception of one item, and that was the elected officials. To me, by this contract, what came to mind was he was becoming the Grand Inquisitor of the Inquisition. He had all this power and no limits to his power. The next thing that I came up with, question I had with, is who and how many other candidates were inspected or vetted for this position? Or was he chosen because he was a friend of one or more of the people sitting on the dais right now? And finally, what were his qualifications for doing this major review of the city? To me, at this point in time, I agree with Mrs. Infante, is take his original information that he gave to the city manager, and at this time, do not extend his contract. If you feel that you need to have more information, go out and have a true independent auditor that has no connections with the city at this time or any of the city council members, so he could come in with a clean slate and have his own impressions taken of the city and see what needs to be done. Again, I say do not extend his contract at this time. Thank you.
Esco Kenny Lama.
Good evening, dear Mayor. Good evening, dear City Council members. For the record, I am Esco Kenny Lama, Solvang business owner, Solvang resident, and registered voter since 2015. Also founder of Solvang Retailers Association, which represents nearly 40 other businesses operating in downtown Solvang area. I might be very new in this town, but I know a lot of what's going on, what's happening, because I'm the only business that operates 12 hours a day, 7 days in a week in downtown village area. And I work every day additional 6 hours for merchandising, ordering, accounting, so after my store operating hours. I work very hard, just like all other new small business owners. Dear Mayor and City Council members, I respect all of you very much because you were elected by 62%, 62%, 62%, 62%, 62%, 62%, 62%.
Please keep your...
Okay, and which the voters turned out in record numbers, 43% in 2018 versus only 28% in 2016. I like to remind to all of you one more time, our community elected all of you by 62% to 38 margin. Yes, exactly, 62%. It's very important. There is a very silent majority outside, but remember, they all support you, 62%. Do you know why they supported you, they elect for you? The community was tired of and sick of long time running good old boys council. Because our community voted for you to make a change to status quo that favored only the selected business and people in the past. Please get rid of the nepotism and drain the swamp of the good old boy network. Because 62% voted against the good old boy council and you are elected. As a result, not even one single incumbent of their candidates was elected. But you got 62%, a landslide victory and huge mandate. You bury them. So you have a full support of this community. That's why we approve and support the appointment of new city auditor. And Again, you represent majority of this community. Don't be afraid. Just do it. Everything will be much better. And if you remember, we gave you at the beginning brooms. I brought them back again. Please. Okay? Please clean it.
All right, thank you. Hazel Mortensen.
Clean it up. Finish the job.
Good evening, council members. I very much support this council in addressing wasteful spending in Solvang. I am appalled by the dramatic increases in funding by these tourist-related organisations, so-called no-profits and special interest groups. The spending for the SCVB went from 400,000 in 2007 to well over 800,000 in 2018. Chamber spending is worse yet, from 16,000 to 25,000 in less than 3 years. A new group started in 2011. Visit SYV has a $1 million budget. This is a 500% increase in tourism spending, costing $2.1 million per year. We cannot accept this as responsible spending. All this multi-duplication with no accountability. Someone needs to start a non-profit to check the books of the other non-profits. The residents are literally being thrown under the tour buses. On another note, Solvang has a real rat problem. I've come to realize they are feeding off the fat of the tourism budget. Heaven forbid that I would call anybody a rat. I read about the foul language in the paper by Mr. Skitt at the last meeting. Sounds as if his mouth wasn't washed out with soap as a child. Money doesn't always mean good breeding. Thank you.
Thank you. Fred Koval.
You didn't start that yet, did you? Oh, reset it, please. Fred Koval, Solvang residency. It's been a while, City Council and Mayor, and I'm here tonight on a very serious matter. Actually, three. This is the first of three. You know, we've heard in the papers about Brown Act violations, left and right, about you folks. Well, wait a minute now. We had two quotes by the previous city attorney out of closed session. What were they? He claimed he had a universally very positive evaluation. And the right course of action was for me and my law partners. This was a violation of the Brown Act. Why? He was reporting out what happened. Why? Why did he do that? The meeting was called to release him. That's what it really was all about. So where was the truth in that? Did he lie about what he said? Sure looked like it to me after reviewing those actions on that night. How about the city? His statement was, the city council majority is entitled to and should be served by a city attorney whose ethical standards and commitment to the rule of law more closely matches their own. That's a key statement. What was it? Ethics. What are they? Here's what I looked up. This is a violation of the attorney's duty of loyalty to the client. As if anyone, he should have been reported to the state bar immediately. I do, however, agree with his statement that as this past city attorney was clearly unethical and uncommitted to the rule of law, and I'm happy to see he's gone. I have another historical fact. Remember the domicile case of 2017? When it was discovered that a council member had moved to Santa Maria, yet was continuing his tenure on the Solvang City Council? Research indicates that this is a violation of state law, and that person needed to resign. The prior city attorney and council then decided to use our taxpayers' funds to claim domicile. What's in your mind? Where do you intend on living? That's where you live. That's where you are. And that was to garner and hold on to the third vote. So, in summary, the city needs all kinds of audits. Start with audit of the city finances, the SCVB, the chamber, the broken planning department, or maybe the past attorney's dealings over the last 20 years. Continue draining the swamp.
Thank you. Karen Jones?
Hello, my name is Karen Jones. I live in Santa Ynez, and I serve on the Community Service District there. I'm the president of the current board. And I came to speak tonight. I am not a friend of Mr. Woodrow. I have recently met him. But I followed in the newspaper reports what was going on. And let me start by saying I did read the preamble. I like your website, and I go there, I watch meetings. Well, I read the preamble, and it is beautiful. And then I read the different articles, finishing with Article 7 and Section 701. As somebody that spoke earlier got a little chuckle from the crowd that, yeah, they want Mr. Woodrow to investigate everyone except for them, and everyone snickered. Well, I encourage you all to read the law, because that's what the law says that this special auditor's scope would be. And it wouldn't be investigating elected officials. So it's helpful if everybody just reads the rules and follows the rules. But as the president of the CSD board, we're really excited about the idea of the cost and consequences being very accurately applied to our wastewater treatment facility that we're going to be building and upgrading. And I know as a city you have many other concerns. My concern is wastewater treatment. And I think it's just so important that when we are entering into these multi-million-dollar deals, that we make sure that we understand the full cost of what the council is buying. You guys have a lot of information that applies to a lot of different things in this city, and wastewater is a big thing, and it is your responsibility to get it right. So I like the idea of an auditor, and I'm very excited that you are taking advantage of your city charter and doing this. I think it sounds like a great idea, and I also would like to thank this council and particularly the wastewater treatment people for being so accommodating. I have called Mr. Woodrow, our general manager, the wastewater committee people that serve with our wastewater committee have been nothing but positive, and we are really getting things done in a way that didn't look possible a year or two ago. So I thank this board, and I commend you. Thank you.
Mitch Williams.
Thank you, Mayor Toussaint and council members. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Mitch Williams. I'm a property owner and business owner in the city of Solvang. I'm here tonight because I've had the opportunity to deal with several different departments within the city of Solvang over the last 3 years over a project that I had proposed here in the city. I've dealt intimately with your planning department, with your public works department, and with senior staff, and with most of you on the dais tonight. I've had an opportunity to meet with your city manager and have some discussions with him. Did not know Mr. Woodrow until just recently. He reached out to me. I had a discussion with him about some of my experiences within the city. I want to applaud all of you for taking this step and for moving forward. I want to encourage you to do that. I've seen within this city, as in with a lot of cities, many things that can be improved, many things that can use help. Sometimes it's better to go outside of your city staff to get a look at that. I want to reiterate what ESCO said, that you are the elected officials. You're the people that the city of Solvang elected to represent them. You have vetted Mr. Woodrow. You're coming forward with a recommendation to move or to not move. And I respect what your decision is. I encourage that free thinking. I encourage all of you to continue ahead and move forward with trying to make this city a better place, a more business-friendly place that works for everyone, the residents and the business owners alike. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mitch. I have no more public speaker slips. I'd like to forward a little bit of time maybe to Thomas to address maybe some of the concerns that were brought up, if you wish.
Sure, I'll be happy to do that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and members of the public. I appreciated the array of comments. First off, as far as I am local, and I feel like we have 1 degree of separation up here in the valley, not 6. So, but truth be told, while I think I'm friendly with all of you now that I'm getting to know you better, I think I first spoke to the mayor after the first of the year when I asked if you would reappoint me to the Santa Barbara Air Pollution Control District Community Advisory Committee. The previous mayor, Mayor Richardson, appointed me to that, and I gave you a call, and we got to know each other, and I certainly like you and your vision of reform and better things ahead for Solvang, so I think we developed a good relationship. I met Daniel recently. He's CPA, and I'm not a CPA. You're right. I think it was Hans who brought that up, or no, maybe I forget who brought it up. But I'm not. Kim might have brought it up, but I'm not a CPA. But the role doesn't call for me to be a CPA. It's a special city auditor. You're looking structurally at organization and at best practices, and I think I'm well qualified to do that. I spent my entire career working uniquely in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, looking at effective way of getting things done. So, but I've enjoyed getting to know Daniel. I think he's got, a great heart on behalf of the city of Solvang. Robert, I've gotten to know a little bit too. Been chairman of the Republican Central Committee for this county for 2.5 years, and while I work across the aisle with people of all parties, persuasions, politically, I did hold that role, and I got to know Robert. Came to a few of our meetings. I got to know him a little bit, and I find we both have a common interest in history, and I like you, and I would say we're friends. That's a good thing. Karen, I had a nice interview with you. I'm impressed with the work you do in the private sector, and I got to know you and some of your concerns, not the least of which you told me lately was you wanted the bathrooms to be clean and Solvang, which I thought gets right down to some of the very basic stuff that a city has to provide, which is services. So I really honor, your, hands-on commitment to making Solvang a better place. I felt we had good communications. I'd like to call you a friend at some point, but we're certainly friendly, and I'm getting to know you, and I think we can work well together. Mr. Dearnis, Chris, I think you have certainly a strong attitude and a strong passion about business and about what can be done for the city of Solvang. You're outspoken. I think every council needs that. And, like I said, I just met you, I don't know, a month ago, 3 weeks ago. So, but hopefully we're getting to know each other well and developing some trust. So in answer to those questions, those are my nature of my relationships with the sitting members of the city council. I also know some of the folks who came up here and testified. Ed Skitt, I have a lot of respect for Ed, and he did not use a swear word. He said S and then didn't say the whole word, Hazel. So I think Ed doesn't quite need his mouth washed out. But But he did come by my office quite a bit when I worked for Congressman Gallagher, and I got to know Ed, and I respect his passion for the community and think he has a lot to offer. And should the council decide that I should go forward and help during the term of the contract that's being presented, I would look forward to help and input from folks like Ed and the rest of you. So as far as other questions, I appreciate what Fred said. I think I don't know if we have a swamp here in Solvang, but I think a good city auditor goes forward and does things impartially. I don't think you start off with a feeling one way or another. I think you have to be impartial and you have to be fair-minded, and I think I have a history of being that way as a person and a professional. I appreciate what Karen has to say. Working closely with the Community Services District, looking at regional wastewater solutions, I think is a great a great objective, and there have been some things that have gotten in the way of that over the years, and I think maybe we can try to transcend those and solve a problem for all the communities here in the Valley. Mitch, I appreciated I enjoyed meeting you and hearing about some of your travails going through planning here at the city, and it seems like things can certainly get better, and we can welcome, developers who want to do really good things here in our city according to the parameters of the city council. ESCO, let's see, Hazel, I appreciate it. I don't know about the rat problem, but anyhow, I don't know if that answers most of the questions, but I tried.
Okay.
Actually, can I have him address the issue that Kim Jensen made about us going to the visitor center? I don't think he appreciates what we were doing there.
The council members asked if I might go over there and just, there's a lot of turmoil, and I think it was really out of the fact that I really appreciate those people at the visitor center. I think they do a good job, and we as a family with my kids have really enjoyed going over there and getting information. We've been up here in the Valley about 8 or 9 years, so I'm an empathetic person and a sympathetic person. I don't like to see people upset about what's going to happen in the future, and I guess it was just my effort to go in there and communicate and say that the council definitely values that visitor center and the people that work there. And so if I miscommunicated, I'm sorry, but that was certainly from the heart, and that's what I tried to do.
There was also another reason.
Go ahead.
They told Miss Hazel Martinson that she was no longer welcome there because she supported the idea of reorganizing the SCVB in the chamber. I thought that was appalling.
Well, I like Hazel, and she likes it. I enjoy getting to know you and your dogs over the years, so you're always welcome if I have this responsibility. So.
Okay. All right, with that, we'll take this back for the council for discussion and action. Who would like to start? Daniel?
I think we've discussed this in quite a bit about having some of these issues looked at, and I think it would be a great idea to have Thomas on board and looking at some of these issues. So I'm in support of it. It's not a long-term. Hopefully, it's not a long-term thing, and hopefully we can get to some of these issues quickly and move on. So I think it's a good idea.
Robert?
One of the comments made was about the city manager has a job to do and the special auditor is taking over that position, and I don't believe that. I believe that the city manager has a job to do, and it's a very important job, and he's got his hands full already. He's brand new to the city. He's doing a great job, and I really appreciate you, David, a lot. I think the city auditor is a fresh set of eyes that looks at practices. It's not uncommon. A lot of cities do it. A lot of businesses do it. And I think that the more people we can get involved, and I know it's a bit of money, and I'm a fiscal conservative. I like to be very cautious about what we spend money on, but I think this city does need a fresh set of eyes, and I'm going to shut my mouth and not say anything else.
Karen?
I have the full faith and confidence in our city manager to do his job. I do believe that a third-party auditor, special auditor, for a defined amount of time to take a closer look at areas that may need improvement. There is no knight in shining armor that's going to come and clean this up in a month or two. But certainly it can be very helpful to us to have somebody come in and take a look at the various departments and how we can become more efficient. With that saying, I'm not in favor of increasing the amount of the contract. I haven't seen the work that's been done yet, so I would like to keep it at the original contract agreement price. Finally, I would like to add to my council members again that I would like to come across as a professional, united entity, and it is difficult for me to sit here and listen to council members badmouth agencies out there, such as what just recently happened when we were talking about one of our residents who was forbidden to go into the Visitors Bureau for various reasons. So I would like that to stop, please.
Chris?
I will not stop. It's our job to do what's best by the community, do what's best for the community. And if one of our community members is being prevented from enjoying what is her right, then I will stand up for her. She is a constituent. So I'm sorry if I offend you, but I will continue. As far as the city auditor is concerned, I've been looking forward to this for quite some time. I've been looking at our city government for the last 3 years in preparation for running for city office. And since that time, trying to figure out what is it that we do and can we do it better? And can we do it with fewer resources? That's a question we all have to ask because the resources are finite and we have a growing volume of costs or expenses related to capital improvement projects and things like this. So the question that actually drove me to consider this was, when was the last time we actually had an audit of the entire city from top to bottom and across the breadth of the city operations? Does anybody know? No, because it's never happened. And unfortunately, like any business, when a CEO comes into a new business, the first thing the CEO does is try to figure out what's working and what's not. What systems make sense? What systems can we eliminate and save some money? And we have to look at personnel and are they performing? So there's a variety of issues and subjects that a city auditor is tasked to look at. Everything from financial to performance to legal. There's a number of questions that we would like to discuss, and I guess we'll do it at a later time when it's appropriate. But this is something that the city auditor does. This is not something that the city manager or the council can do. And if you guys would read the charter, as Ms. Jones had done, and she's not even a Solvang resident, I think you would appreciate the role that he plays and the expertise and experience that Tom, or Mr. Woodrow brings to this particular position. I'm really excited about this and what we're going to find from this work that he's going to do. So as far as I'm concerned, I would urge my fellow council members to fully fund this contract and move forward with it.
And I'll just say this is actually one of the things I ran on. I really think the city does need an audit. I've been now through 2 councils, and I'll just have to say that I had an experience very early on when I came onto the council in 2016, and that's when we went through the water rate study. And there ended up being millions and millions of dollars of unjustified expenses in that study. That raised a flag. I emailed the city manager. I asked for a lot of financial information. I was then told the servers are broken. I was then told that they couldn't produce backups of the records. I then got a call from another council member who was in City Hall saying that all the finance records were being pulled down from the attic and marked for destruction. I went in and spoke with the city manager. I was told that he was exercising seismic retrofitting and fiscal responsibility by taking advantage of a free shred day. At the water rate hearing, it was abruptly canceled, and it was cited that the water rate study had come to an end. Everyone had disappeared, including the consultants, and the city manager claimed that due to newly found water meter efficiencies, we no longer need water rate increases. This makes no sense to me. Do water meters produce water? If so, I think we could be very rich. This city does need a financial audit. I'm going to stand strong behind that, and I would like to give direction to the city auditor, especially auditor, to evaluate possibly bringing in a more comprehensive financial audit of the entire city. Yes.
On Mr. Woodrow's scope of services. One of them is to work with an ad hoc committee of the council for review of destination marketing services. And I just wanted to make sure that you had all seen that. The mayor would then be authorized to appoint an ad hoc committee. I want to just, and this is something the city manager and I have talked about, make very clear, ad hoc committees are for a limited purpose, so it would be just for the limited purpose of the working with the special city auditor, and it has a limited time to it. So again, it would be truly an ad hoc committee.
Okay.
Thanks.
So if we move forward with this contract, would we think about considering who would be on that ad hoc now, or would that come back on the agenda at the next meeting?
You could do it as part of approval of this, or you could bring it back at your August meeting. I understand, I think you all have a desire for Mr. Woodrow to get going, and so you may want to go ahead and do that now.
Okay. So maybe we could first entertain a motion approving or not approving the contract, and then we could have some discussion around an ad hoc and then approve that. Would that make sense?
It would certainly make sense to do it that way. You're not going to have an ad hoc committee if you don't have the scope of services.
I mean, with that, I will move that we approve this contract.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, unless you're going to do it under separate action, I would also ask that you add as a part of your motion there that you would approve the supplemental appropriation and authorize the mayor to execute the contract.
Okay, I'll accept that amendment.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded.
Mayor Toussaint?
Yes.
Councilmember Dearness?
Yes.
Clerk?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Wait.
No, I can't accept the supplemental amount of money. No.
Okay. Consideration of an ad hoc subcommittee, right? Is there anyone that would like to be on that?
I would certainly like to be on that, given my background as a business advisor and looking at business models and looking at the industry in which they operate. I definitely want to be a participant in that, on that committee.
Okay.
I think there might be too many photos of me and Chris roaming around there, so maybe we should find someone else that could possibly serve on that committee.
Well, I'm just the retail guy, so I'll join you on that.
Excellent.
Just the retail guy.
Chris and Robert? Is that a motion?
Are you interested? Is Karen interested? Would you? No?
No, I'm not interested. Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, I think that since it's truly an ad hoc committee, you could just appoint it, but there's nothing to keep the council from essentially ratifying that appointment.
Doesn't need a motion then.
Okay.
Correct.
So Chris and Robert will work on it. Okay.
Right.
With that, we'll move on to item number 2. Perfect. Can we get a title readout and staff report?
Item 2, contract with Solvang Chamber of Commerce.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this is an item that obviously has evoked much emotion in the community, and so I'm going to try to be simply like a scribe here. At your meeting of June the 24th, when you considered the budget, there were items including requests, one, and I'm going to do these items separately and try and keep them very separate, including at the request of, I believe, both agencies. So for the chamber had made a request. Initially, I believe it was for $300,000. They had provided you with a proposed scope of services and a proposed budget at $300,000. Your council had a lot of discussion, including discussion about contract changes that you would like to see, ultimately, for your budget purposes and your budget purposes only, you included $150,000. In order to have an effective contract with the chamber, you needed to have an actual scope of services and a budget that would match that $150,000. You also, again, directed me to make certain changes for all of the contracts, including one that I don't remember which council member raised it, but raised it from the city of Goleta, what I'll call a no use of funds for participating in political activities in the city, a no suing the city, and you had some other fiscal concerns about making sure that, in fact, there were budgets that matched what the proposed expenditure were and what I'll call performance matrices. After that meeting, I learned and I don't know the reasons or incentives. I wasn't here in 2018, but apparently there were contracts entered into, negotiated by the former city manager and entered into, that created for the chamber, apparently, at least ostensibly, a 2-year budget. The problem with that is that a 2-year contract. The problem with that is you're on a 1-year budget cycle. So I frankly don't know how you could have a 2-year contract on a 1-year budget cycle. When you read the contract, the effect of the contract would be that the chamber would perform 2 years of services that were detailed in the contract, and the council was only required to pay for the first year of services and then to consider the second year payment. I don't believe that that's actually an effective contract. I believe that your action on June the 24th in approving something other than their full request and matching funds for the budget that they presented essentially voided the previous contract. We have, the mayor and I, at your direction, gone back to negotiate with the chamber a contract that matches their request. And we went back and initially talked about some form of interim contract so that we could have payment occur while we continued those negotiations. Through discussion with the chamber, they asked us for a first quarter contract, so a contract limited to a 9-month period. We talked about that being 1/4 of the $150,000 that you had put in the budget, so $37,500. But the list of things that they gave to us and said that they would like payment from the city for was limited to 2 items. First was an update to what is called a walk, shop, dine map, and apparently it costs $15,000 to design, layout, and print one round of that walk, shop, dine map. And they also asked that you reimburse them for the costs of the remainder of the 2019 summer concert series that occurs in the Solvang City Park. And that totals $20,000. So we have made a recommendation to you for a revised contract that includes the items that you directed us to include in a contract for an amount of $35,000. Subsequently, I did hear from the president of the chamber. He has asked that you also fund, and I believe he's here, so he can probably better describe them, but fund business classes that the chamber puts on in the community. And apparently the total of those business classes is $2,500 for a quarter. And I'm going to allow him to better describe that. So they are requesting a total of $37,500. What I am recommending is that this council approve this proposed contract and authorize the mayor to execute it in substantial conformity with what you've been presented. There may be some slight changes. You were given another proposed set of changes I haven't even seen and had an opportunity to look at them. But I would not recommend any changes of substance to what we've negotiated. And again, if there is something that is not a substantial change or change of substance, then the mayor would be authorized to make that determination. If there's a change of substance and they wouldn't accept the contract otherwise, we would come back to you. Thank you.
Are there any questions of the staff report? Okay.
Yes, so the contracts that were just handed to us this evening, are these the contracts that you have not had a chance to review?
As far as I know, I've not seen these contracts. I have since the agenda was posted, I've been received, I think, at least 2 different versions of comments from the president of the Solvang Chamber of Commerce. Frankly, the main thing I could see as a difference in them was the change that they're now asking for another $2,500. I would suggest that the mayor and I, if you do take action on this item, the mayor and I meet and talk to them about what other changes they're proposing, and if they are substantive, then we would bring them back. If they're not substantive, then the mayor would be authorized to sign a contract in substantial conformance.
I got a quick question. So my understanding is that we give them this money, and the contract ends on September the 30th,
That is correct.
and we owe them nothing more.
That would be correct. And I should augment that. If you were to decide to do more, then you could do more. This contract allows for extension on signature of both parties. This does actually relate to a certain extent to the first item you looked at tonight. You've actually asked Mr. Woodrow to look at, I think the term was city promotional services. You've talked about having an ad hoc committee that could go through some sort of public process, and we've asked them actually to participate in that public process if there is such a public process. So I expect the chamber would take that opportunity to participate in your process, and that may end up involving some request for additional monies.
Okay.
Was there not a cash balance? Did they not have a cash balance sitting there? I remember when we discussed this originally, you said that they should not be spending money before the contract is signed, correct? And that they would have to return those funds. So is there still funds sitting there? I guess my question is, do they already have this money?
I have asked that question. I was told that the executive director is on vacation until, I believe, June the 29th. Before, I would urge, in fact, I would insist that before the council actually spend more money, that we get the final report for the 2018-19 fiscal year and the approximately $250,000 that the city gave them in 2018-19, and make sure that that aligns with the 2018-19 budget. And I can't imagine there would be any problem with that. Again, all I understand, and
Right.
It's summertime, people take
Right,
vacations.
right.
As I understand, the executive director is on
Okay,
vacation.
so we really don't know. They could have all this money sitting in the bank right now and asking for more money, and we just don't know.
My understanding, however, is that they have, in fact, contracted for the maps that we're talking about, and they went ahead and contracted, actually, I think they may have contracted at the beginning of the summer with the assumption that they were going to get the full concert series funded. The concert series has continued to go on and is going to continue going on.
I got a quick question. There's no budget attached to this, right?
There is not a budget attached to this because their request is limited to, or was limited to,
A 3-month
those-
window.
Yeah, those 2 very specific items for which I've been told there are going to be invoices provided. So you would be providing money based upon the provision of invoices.
And they couldn't find the time to produce a simple budget?
Mr. Mayor, Council Member Dearness, I'm going to just repeat that I have been trying to keep this on a very objective level, that within the community there has been a lot of emotion. I think you're going to hear more of it this evening. I fully appreciate the interest in having detailed budgets. Again, we weren't able to meet with them until last Friday. It started as a somewhat heated meeting. I think that it turned into a very good business discussion. I've been chastised in the newspaper for mentioning that sometimes when you do contracts, you approach them in what I termed a business-like fashion. I certainly did not mean that to be some statement of intent of nefarious purpose. Again, I also mentioned I was not here in 2018 when the previous contracts were negotiated. I don't see those as something that I would have approached this contract in this way. I believe that if we were talking about expenditures that had not essentially already been contracted for, invoiced for, and for which we are all quite familiar with the product, I'll call it, we would have asked for more detail, including a detailed budget. I was hoping that we would be able to, I'm going to use the term, heal this issue to a certain extent. I understand I'm not trying to interject my own personal feelings into this, other than I've been drug out in the newspaper, chastised. I think you all have been, including in the community and in public.
Sure.
I am here because I actually live in the 93463 zip code. I actually feel a commitment to this city, and so again, I believe that the mayor and I are making a recommendation which is of limited scope for a limited
Please
period
make
of
sure you
time.
stay in the microphone. Sorry.
That's right.
I guess the surprise, in my mind, the surprise is that I thought we were auditing them along with these funds, and that their budgets would be reported to us on a regular basis, at least on a quarterly basis, and that quarter would have ended June 30th. Still, we don't have anything from that period?
Okay, so they have agreed to supply us with the detailed budget quarterly. It's item number 7. And if you recall, we terminated the contract abruptly.
Where did you get
when
that?
They were going
Wait,
to
where did you get that?
When they were going to do their presentation, so we did not get to see their budget and their presentation.
Okay, so where did you get that?
Page 3 of 6, item number 7.
Yeah, it's not in my binder, so I can't look at that.
Right. That's actually a provision of the contract. The provision of the contract is that they are in fact going to provide us that information on a going forward basis for this, at least this quarter. Also, before we would pay them for this new year, we would get the final report that they were obligated to provide us under the old contract.
So this came from the handouts, right? But
It's
these
in,
handouts-
it's also in the exact, actually, it's in the contract that was in
Okay.
your.
My point is, this
The
was
original
not
contract
part
did
of
say
the-
monthly. The new one underlines and is added quarterly, detailed budget.
Look, I'm going to take
So-
exception to
so
the fact that
may
this
I-
was not
may I
included in our
please-
binder.
May I please, Mr. Mayor? This is the unfortunate thing of receiving things from the public at the dais. There is an existing contract. We have proposed that they actually provide us with a monthly report. They have asked if they could, apparently, they have asked if they could do that quarterly. I would say, unless you believe that that is in the scope of a 3-month budget with one payment, is something of major significance, I think that would be exactly the kind of thing that you would leave to the mayor to potentially sign. Either we get one quarterly report for one expenditure or 3 one-month reports. Again, I think that either way would be in substantial conformity with what has been presented to you. We will get a final report from, and I'm going to note how very awkward this is, so I'm sorry. But
It's working on that.
we will get a final 2018-19 report before expending 19-20 money. Again, as I understand, it's simply a matter of vacations happened before we received that final report.
Are there any other questions of the staff report? Okay, we'll go to public comment. First speaker, Hans Deuce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had no comment at this time.
Okay. Charles Werner.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council. I hope you will grant me more than 3 minutes, since I would like to first respond, since there seems to be a lot of misinformation, disinformation, misunderstanding about the chamber. We are required.
So Charles, just so you know, because this is your item, I'm going to allow you to just to clarify. So just
Beautiful.
go do what you need to do.
We are required to give you.
But could you speak a little closer to the microphone?
We're required to give you a quarterly written report. We have done that for the first 3 quarters of this fiscal year. We always give it to you approximately a month after the end of the fiscal quarter, which is according to generally accepted accounting principles. And by the end of July, we will give you the report for the final quarter. So we have complied completely with all the requirements of the contract. Tracy Beard has given the City Council a monthly report every month. At least that's my understanding. So again, I am a little confused and a little concerned here about the misrepresentations about whether or not we have complied with our contract. As I've told you all before, I'm a contract attorney. I've been doing this a very long time. I have made sure we have complied with the letter of that contract. So now on to the interim contract. I gave you tonight, and just for Chip's reference, the only change in this document is to add that 2,500 in. And so you have basically 2 documents. First is what we lawyers call a red line, which is where Chip made changes and then I made changes to his changes. So his changes are in dark red. My changes are in light red. That's so attorneys can track what each other says, what each other wants in terms of revisions. So forgive me if it's a little hard for you to follow, but I'll try to take you through it. Section 2, the only substantive change I made was adding $2,500 for our business classes. And those classes are for July, August, and September. It's my understanding from Tracy, who is indeed on vacation and who doesn't want to hear about this while she's on vacation. There are 2 classes scheduled for July, 2 classes scheduled for August, 2 classes scheduled for September. Instructors need to be paid, rooms need to be booked, and again, if you'll pardon my pun there, we're on the hook for all of this if you don't give us the money to help us fund this. Because we have contracts, just like the music in the park, that go through the end of the summer, and we're going to be on the hook for paying for all those people if the city doesn't give us our money, because we're on a fiscal year, we're on a calendar year, and you're on a fiscal year. And so every summer, there's this strange flip-flop of where, oh, well, this is for the next year, but it hasn't been funded yet, but we have to contractually commit to do the music in the park, the classes, the walk, shop, wine, and dine map. So all those things need to be paid for. And Chip had asked me, and I responded to him on this. He said, well, gee, did the city pay for those classes last year? Yes, the city did. If you look at our contract with the city, section 4L is entitled Consultation, Services, and Workshops. And according to Tracy, we did approximately 20 of those classes in this past fiscal year, and the city did indeed, some of the city's money went to pay for those classes. So that's section 2 of this red line. So now if you want to look at section 4, again, the only substantive change made there was to add those business classes in. That's it. And Chip already has, it sounds to me, unless I misunderstood what you said tonight, has agreed to recommend that you give us $37,500 instead of $35,000 to cover those classes. Now we'll get on to the 2 areas of substantive change, which are section 7 on termination, which would be on page 3 of your red line. The one change I made was to change the time frame for termination from 30 to 90 days, and that's for termination without cause. I believe that SCVB or SVCB, whatever it is, wanted you to completely eliminate that provision. And according at least to my reading of the agenda tonight, your city negotiation team has recommended deleting the termination without cause provision in the SCVB contract, because it was only going to be a contract for 6 months. Well, our contract's only going to be for 3 months, so if you don't like me changing it from 30 to 90 days, I'd be totally happy with you totally deleting that clause, because that's what your own team has recommended for their contract for 6 months, and our contract's only for 3 months. So either way, a 90-day notice or eliminate it completely. I'd like to eliminate it completely. That sounds like a good idea. And then the final sentence in that paragraph on termination, I have deleted in my red line, and the reason for that, again, is very simple. This sentence provides that if you terminate our contract, we have to return the funds we got from you. Again, we're on the hook for all these contracts. It's going to be bad enough if you terminate our contract without you asking for money back too, when we have all these other people we've already committed to for various things during the time frame where we were going to use that money, such as maps, such as music, such as whatever. You know, we have to enter into contracts with these people, and all those contracts have a certain termination period in them. And, you know, that's just the nature of life in the big city. Okay, so that is section 7. Now the only other substantive change I'd like to talk about is section 8, which is entitled Indemnification, Release, and Limitation on Right to Sue. The first paragraph of section 8 has to do with indemnification. And basically what indemnification is, it protects you from being dragged into a lawsuit for something someone else has done or not done. Normally indemnification provisions are mutual. The one in our contract with the city is not. It is unilateral, meaning we have to indemnify the city, but the city does not have to indemnify us. Frankly, I have no problem with indemnifying the city for things we do or don't do with respect to the contract. Unfortunately, the language put in by an attorney at Chip's office goes way beyond that. It requires that we indemnify the city for the city's performance under the agreement. To me, that's simply unacceptable. I've been doing this a very long time, even longer than Chip. I've been doing contract law for 37 years, and I've never seen anybody say, well, you indemnify us for our actions. That's unconscionable, and I don't want that in the contract. And that's why I deleted that language. Then there's a second full paragraph in the indemnification provision, section 8, where I deleted the entire paragraph. And the reason I deleted that entire paragraph will be explained momentarily. This provision is entitled Indemnification, Release, and Limitation on Right to Sue. Normally, a release is only seen in the context of a settlement agreement, where two parties agree to settle a dispute between them, and one party pays the other who agrees to release claims. Normally, a release is not seen in a contractual setting, and I would argue it's both unconscionable and inappropriate in a contractual setting. This paragraph would effectively require the Chamber surrender all of its rights with regard to enforcing the contract, because it says we can't go after the city for anything with regard to the contract. Again, to me, in my time of doing law, that's simply unacceptable and is something you never see in an arm's length contract. And that's why I deleted that paragraph. So that's basically my substantive changes with regard to Section 10, political action. I have no problem. The one that showed up in the packet was very different than the red line you guys sent me, so I don't know why that is, if you had revised it. Subsequent to sending me that original red line, it's much simpler than the original one you sent me. But either way, I don't care. I don't care about that provision as long as it's simply limited to elections in the city of Solvang. Because as I explained at our meeting with the mayor and Chip, we are contacted by WACE, the Western Association of Chamber Executives, and Cal Chamber all the time with something that says, please give your support to this piece of legislation before the state legislature. Please oppose this piece of legislation before the state legislature, and let us know if you're willing to let us use your name to do so. And so we probably get 3 or 4 of those a week about various things they want us to support or oppose. I want to be able to do that. I also want to be able to be free to hold our forums, which we hold for the political candidates in this town, where they can all come and speak their mind, and the voters can all hear them. I want to also be able to be free to continue to do that. Beyond that, I'd rather not be involved in politics. Frankly, I don't know why any of you are. Seriously. I mean, even if you win by a landslide, whatever percent it is, you still have a whole bunch of people who are pissed because they voted for the other person. So I don't know why anybody goes into politics. And all I can say in that regard is, God bless you. So there you go. That's it. You got any questions for me? I'll be happy to answer them.
Are there any questions of Charles? No? Okay.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Hazel Mortensen.
This, Hazel Mortensen, resident of Solvang. This has been an eventful 2 weeks for me. Firstly, Mrs. Farhab of the Visitors Bureau told her staff that I was responsible for them losing their jobs. I did not have any knowledge of she or Mrs. Beard having written to the council, so I was shocked when the 2 sisters who work at the Visitors Bureau asked me to leave when I entered their workplace. They said I was not welcome there. It seemed their boss had blamed me for their dismissal. They had their young children with them. I did not want to have a shouting match in front of the children, so I left. I left. As I did, they closed the door and put the close sign up. Later, I was told about events at the council meeting the previous evening. Last Thursday afternoon, I phoned the chamber to ask for the phone number of a store owner in town. The female answering the phone had the audacity to ask me if I minded telling her why I wished to speak to the store owner. I told her it was none of her business. She then asked my name and gave me the phone number. Last October, while I was talking to friends at a gathering, Mrs. Beard rudely cut in. She said they, whoever they are, have done a background check on me and found that I'm English. Something I've never hidden. I don't approve of these women and their behavior. The people who benefit from my taxes, I don't expect to get away with treating a resident that pays for their wages. It's disgusting. They're acting like spoilt brats. Thank you.
Eugene Boyle.
Thank you, members of the council. What I'm going to address is the potential for funding or defunding the Chamber of Commerce. I understand some decisions were made in closed session, and I want to address those things. Our city economy is tourism-driven. It's unique in its character and its Danish-European appeal. Because of that uniqueness, it cannot be so cavalierly compared to other California cities, as has been reported. Tourism provides substantial income to our city. Much of that is realized via the positive action and advertising by the Chamber of Commerce and the SCVB. I urge you to reinstate their funding, fund them for the next fiscal year. I think you will find that a substantial part of our city income is driven by bed tax and sales tax revenues. all of which are driven by tourism. Respectfully, Gene Boyle, former council member.
Ed Skip.
Mayor, Roger and Mr. Boyle have hit most of the points I was going to say.
Okay, I will pull your speaker slip.
Thank you.
Kenny Escolama.
Hello again. For the record, I am Esco Kenny Lama, Solvang business owner, Solvang Retailers Association founder, member of Solvang Chamber of Commerce. Dear Mayor and very respectful City Council members, since I moved and started my business here, and the city direct me to become a member of Chamber, and I pay my dues every year, and I'm still paying it for it. But honestly, I don't know what they're doing and how they're spending their money, because it is not benefiting me at all. Even they are claiming proudly they are promoting Solvang and they bring lots of tourists. When I look around at the type of the tourists, not our favorable type, those tourists even do not spend money, even hesitating buying an ice cream. Basically, in my opinion, Chamber is wasting our and city money by trying promoting Solvang in Lompoc in Santa Maria. Really, does Solvang need to be promoted in Lompoc, in Santa Maria, or even in Solvang? I hear Chamber start getting $16,000 per year, but now asking nearly $300,000 from city. 15 times more money from where they started getting it. And also I hear they're asking $16,000 just to design a flyer, a city map. I can do it for free. It is ridiculous just this, if it is for design $16,000 a map, it is ridiculous. And I would like to know, did our business grow 15 times in Solvang? Absolutely no. In opposite, our business is bleeding and shrinking. Our clientele is getting worse and worse by the years. Our business is now depending only to the weekend and holidays. The rest of the majority days, Solvang looks like a ghost town, even in high tourist season, just like today, and will be same tomorrow and Thursday too. Thanks to the chambers doing such a lousy job. And they're proud of it, and yet shameless. They still want more money and more money. For what? Doing nothing. Dear City Council members, think about again. If it was your own money, would you donate to someone unconditionally? And when you decided not to give it anymore, does that person has a right to sue you or blame on you? So this is people's money. Please be stingy and be very careful. Next or future City Council might be after you for wasting people's money. Present Chamber of Commerce is not transparent. Who is their board? How does their board get elected? Not elected, but by hand picked up. I have been their member since for last 3 years. I was never invited for the election nor for their board of directors meetings. In opposite, they were hiding from us. They appoint only each other and they do not have any obligation nor responsibility to their members. They don't care for their members.
Escometa.
Okay, sorry, I had some more things to say, but I hope, and also again, I remind you, you were elected to save the city and city's money, people's money. You were elected by 62%. Please remember those silent majority outside. Thank you.
Fred Koval.
Mayor and City Council members, Fred Koval. I'd like to give you a bird's eye view of tourism and what is TOT. What is TOT? Bed tax, transit occupancy tax. The state mandated it, I believe. Well, somebody did, and that had to, and that had to do with taking care of the infrastructure, all the impacts to the residents, the traffic, the roads, the quality of life for the residents are supposed to be mitigated by the TOT. Over time, certain members of the community, especially those receiving the benefit of city funds, to market their business, have been conditioned to believe that part of the TOT is for the purposes of advertising local businesses. Well, is that true? You know, the council members over that period of time, since inception in 1985, that the members have benefited by the handout while deferred maintenance and projects for the community are ignored. There appears to be what has led the city to the position it is today. Huge capital projects. The wastewater treatment plant is, of course, the major focus right now. So a lot of people say water rates are too high. And of course, they haven't been raised in this for a few years now, quite rightly, because they're right up there, way too high for this city. And we have major other impacts that are coming on us: the stormwater, the SIGMA, the sustainability groundwater management. These are all going to be very costly. And it's going to be a full employment act for attorneys, no question about that. So, are we going to raise our water rates again? Are we going to do what ID1 did, the water district? Just put it on the residents' property taxes. You could easily do that. Realize, of course, that the city has no responsibility to apply any of the TOT to businesses, to business advertising. None whatsoever. So why have all of these mentioned previously by previous speakers, why the requests have just gone up almost exponentially? And what are we getting? Is there any return for our buck? We have no measurement parameters that indicate that. We hear great stories of how good it is. So my final question is, why are the residents getting run over by the power of the tourist industry to lobby our elected officials? It's got to stop.
Thank you, Fred. I believe that's all the public speaker slips. No? Oh, is there anyone else like to speak on this item? Bent?
I had a slip of mine. My name is Ben Olsen, and good evening to the mayor and the council. Nice to see you all. And I do remember that we were back in Hotel Cork in the month of May for a meeting that was raised by the chamber. It was a very good meeting, informative meeting, and I believe all of you were there. And we were all asked, what can we do to make Solvang better? And we were going back and forth on many different ideas. And I think we came up with new ideas, new events, and so forth and so on. And I think you were all behind it. And next thing I knew, I was on a short trip, and I come back, and then I did hear that you had canceled the contract with SCVB and dug into the chamber. So I wonder who is going to do the events and who's going to do our Solvang in the future if you're not going to help to do this, if you're not going to support our SCVB. SCVB had done a very, very good job. And I have been on it myself. I was one of those who hired Choice way back then. And I thought it was a very good choice. He has been very good for the city and good for the business community. So I really hope you will change your mind on going back and look at the contract again. And we need SCVB in Solvang.
Solvang is a beautiful town, and I know some of you thought we need to look more like Denmark. No, we don't, because Solvang is better than Denmark in many, many ways. Solvang is more Danish than Denmark in many, many cases. I know. Isn't that amazing?
Sorry,
But it is.
We have churches.
Unbelievable. Anyway, I hope you will change your mind. I beg you to change your mind, because we need to have Solvang prosper and go into the future with a good and beautiful city as we have. And now we are, John Martino and me, we are working on a Christmas tree, and we will have a Christmas tree up for Christmas, and we're going to have a beautiful Christmas event and holiday event. So I hope you will change your mind, ladies and gentlemen. And I trust in you. I voted for you, and I know Chris all my life. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. I have no more speaker slips. With that, we'll take this back to the council for discussion and action. I think there are several concerns brought up by the president of the chamber, so maybe Chip, if you'd like the opportunity to address any of those.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I would ask you all to just use the contract as proposed in the agenda packet. I've been looking at what Mr. Werner provided to you, and with all respect to Mr. Werner, it's not a red line to the contract that's in the agenda packet. I've received several different red lines from him. Again, we met on Friday morning, and in great attempt at respect to the chamber, my office turned a first draft of the contract around on Friday and provided it. We received comments back. I have incorporated some of his requested changes, included, he mentioned that the language about use of funds in elections was shortened. We didn't include some of his other items, but again, the contract that's actually in your agenda packet, which was provided to you with the packet yesterday, is the contract that we are recommending to you, with a possible exception, which is, and I'm going to say, I'm not making a recommendation about dollar amounts in one way or the other. That is entirely in the purview of the city council. So I'm going to back off and completely respect whatever you decide from that perspective to fund. So we had an original request on Friday that I understood was for two items that totaled $35,000. They did mention that they would like $37,500, which is 1/4 of 150, but did not have a third item. You've now had the third item presented to you. And again, I'm going to entirely leave that as is appropriate to your council discussion. Mr. Mayor, you may have a comment on that. Again, as to the other items he mentioned, though, those have been addressed in the draft that's actually in your packet. I'd note, for example, and the reason that I caught this is in the discussion about whether you're getting a report from them on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis. It's at page 3 of the contract that's in your packet. That language is actually shortened because you're only making one payment. And my recommendation, if you're only making one payment one time, then having a comprehensive budget, including a detailed itemized list for these expenses that have been charged against that payment, would only happen one time. Again, you're only making it once.
Okay. With that, we'll take it back to the council. Who would like to start? Daniel?
As I expressed, my only concern is what the cash balance is that they have, and if they have the funds to provide for this, then I don't really see the point in funding something that already is sitting there. other than that, I think Chip and the mayor have done a fine job negotiating this, and it's unfortunate that we have to negotiate it again in front of everyone. It seems like a lot of time wasted, but my only other concern is due to some of the hostilities. There's been a lot of, and Chip's had to deal with it, the council's had to deal with it, a lot of fake news out there regarding a lot of what's happened, and I'm glad that Chip's been able to clarify a lot of those issues.
Robert?
In no particular order. Gotcha. No one on this council wants to defund or to not market tourism in this city. Everybody knows how important it is. Nobody's that stupid up here. We knocked on hundreds of doors, and the people in this town want water, they want sewer, they want wastewater treatments, they want traffic mitigation, they want safety. Granted, we all know that tourism is very, very, very important for this town. I get about 20 emails, mostly from the same names, pretty much verbatim, "You've killed tourism. Why have you killed tourism?" I'm like, how is that possible that happens? We're not trying to kill tourism. We're trying to use what we can with the money that we have to serve the most residents. What was the percentage? If I went to the people, we need to tighten the strings here on the money that this city spends. And if I went to the people that voted for me, that don't show up here, because I know it's a smaller group of people that are very adamant, and I appreciate that because we need that in this town. But I would be doing a disservice to the people that elected me to tighten the strings on the city's money, to watch what we do, to watch where we spend. I'm incredulous to it. And nobody on the council wants to defund tourism because we all know where this comes from. And if people that are upset about this, we have an election every 2 years. And I'm sure that there'll be an active group here because we've been pretty much vilified via email and voicemail and on the streets over our decisions on tourist funding. And it just gets a little old. And to be honest with you, the chicken S thing to do would be to cave in to 30 people that show up at every meeting and do what they tell us to do. People that elected us, people that support us, ask us to do things. The people that opposed us tell us what to do. It's really, really odd, folks, and I'm tired of it. We want to do what is best for the most people in this town. And if tightening the strings to the money person in this town is what we have to do to provide for the most residents, that's what we'll do. So that's where I stand on this. I agree with the chamber. I want them to get the $37,000. I want the chamber to keep functioning. But this vitriol that has come out over this is really, really sad.
Karen?
Okay, well, I would go along with allowing the mayor and the city attorney to re-review the contract where I found some substantial, what I call material changes, which brought us here to begin with, which is the indemnification, release, and limitation on the right to sue, which was my issue to begin with. So, with the $37,000, I have no issue with that for business classes. There are minor changes to the contract that I'm looking at here, and I've been very actively looking at both sets of contracts that I have in front of me. I would encourage our city attorney and the mayor to re-review 8.7, indemnification, release, and limitations, and right to sue. Because there were some things that were definitely eliminated in that area. So I'm not sure exactly which rendition you received, what we have sitting up here, what the differences are. So I would only be hesitant to approve the contract based upon that, but I would be willing to have you all make a decision regarding that. And then my final point would be that, we are very, very, very concerned and interested in promoting tourism in this town, as Mr. Clark so stated. What I don't want to see up here again on this council is for this to be a forum for people to air their personal opinions on organizations. because what we are doing is sitting here to make decisions about funding organizations to make it better for our residents and for the city of Solvang. So it doesn't help us to make decisions when we hear negative personal criticisms of individuals that we may or may not care for. So again, I encourage my council members to make their decisions based upon fact and what is best for this city of Solvang. Thank you.
Chris?
Obviously, this debate, this discussion, it stirs a lot of passion and emotions across the spectrum, and I truly appreciate Robert Clark's comments. I really do. Thank you for those comments. There's so much to discuss on this topic, and this is not unique to Solvang. This trend toward cutting funding for chambers and Visitors Bureau has been going on now for several years, and not just in the local area. Is it okay if I read something from online? Because it actually pertains to it's almost the same identical thing that we're dealing with here. This comes from the Daily Breeze, and it has to do with Redondo Beach. This is in 2017. I'll just go ahead and read it. It says, the council decided against providing $350,000 in interim funding to the Redondo Beach Chamber of Commerce Visitors Bureau, that's an awful long title, to the Redondo Beach Chamber of Commerce Visitors Bureau to market the city while a subcommittee explores who will in the future. Instead, $150,000 will go toward either a future tourism improvement district or a new contract if the city decides to put the services out to bid. The subcommittee also will determine the fate of separate contract with the Chamber for special events. Chamber funding was one of the most contentious topics in recent weeks of budget talks. Earlier this month, the council decided to end a long-standing arrangement giving the Visitors Bureau a share of hotel tax that has ballooned to more than $700,000 a year. I read that only because a lot of these facts are very similar to what we're dealing with. And this is just one city of many. One of the things that I did spend more than 15 minutes, by the way, Mr. Jensen, on this issue. And I'm trying to find it. Unfortunately, it is available. It has to do with the, here it is. This was a survey produced by the Western Association of Chamber Executives. It was called the Government Funding 2018 Survey Results. And it was very thorough. And it described chambers of various sizes, the funding levels that they received, what they did with it. It was really amazing. And I encourage you guys to pick one up over there. I received this from the mayor of Vacaville at one of our leadership council trainings in Newport Beach. We went there for a leadership training class, and I asked a number of people down there what they were doing and how they were doing it with respect to the Chamber and Visitors Bureau. And what I found interesting is that cities like Sausalito, which arguably is a tourist destination, right? Their funding is between $10,000 and $30,000 for their Chamber of Commerce. Now, I don't know if that's the right level of funding, but I encourage you guys to look at this and then do your own research online. This is a discussion that this council will be having. I assure you of that. And that's one of the reasons why I volunteered to work with the new city auditor to try and determine what is the right thing to do for this city. How do we grow revenues for TOT and for sales tax? What's the most cost-effective way to do that? Well, I think it's time to have a frank and open discussion, have workshops on this, let the entire city get involved. If the two entities are competitive and they bring to the council a particular offer or proposal that this council agrees to, then so be it. We refund them again at least at that level or maybe even more. I'm not opposed to giving money or investing the city's money, especially when we're going to get some kind of rate of return on this. That's what we've been asking. What is the return on the investment dollars invested by the city council? That hasn't been defined by either entity. In fact, that's a question that I'm trying to get to the bottom of, and hopefully this new entity or this ad hoc committee will be able to develop that answer. Having said that, I'm in favor of accepting the contract as Chip had described it. I think there's no need to make any further changes. Other than perhaps the amounts, I'm not convinced that the $2,500 is an essential expense for the city. I haven't heard anything to suggest that it is. I'm not convinced that the $15,000 for the maps is an essential cost that the city must bear. If this was so important, then the businesses themselves would probably spend the money, because after all, it's for them. And just as a metric of comparison, Las Olivas doesn't have a city government. Las Olivas doesn't receive any government funding from anybody that I'm aware of, at least not in any substantial way. And yet they managed to do just fine. And they managed to grow the city, the village. I guess it's a town. It's not even an incorporated town. But they still managed to grow their revenues. That's the kind of question and discussion we need to figure out. How do we do more with less? So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it back to you.
Okay. Personally, I think this is a issue that the past council is dealing with as well. Lots of questions or competition between the chamber, the SCVB. My opinion is last year just kind of led the council into hitting the fund all button, because quite frankly, that's a lot easier to do than the process we're undertaking today. So I think the fairest thing at this point is to move forward with this contract. I think it provides interim funding to at least make sure there's no shutdown of the services. In the meantime, I think the fairest thing is to issue out for an RFP and allow all parties of interest to participate in RFP and really get to the bottom of what services are most effective for this community and how can we control cost the best possible way. We're all trying to keep costs down. We have a lot of constraints in our budget. I think that was loud and clear from the council retreat. I think it's loud and clear when you review the budget that we just had. Capital improvement, much needed capital improvement projects far exceed the city's ability to pay for them. Look at Los Olivos. Their chamber provides the bathrooms so that they can support tourism. Without infrastructure, there is no tourism. You can't support it. We have to focus on the priorities that government was originally intended to take care of. So with that, that's my position. I'd like to move this contract. I also think that we should issue out for an RFP, really get good, valuable feedback in an open, transparent way, get the professionals in here, see presentations. Maybe we find out the way it is today is the absolute best way. Maybe we find out we need to increase the funding. Maybe we find out we need to decrease it. I wouldn't want to prejudge any one of those scenarios. But the only way to get to that point where everyone feels the most comfortable moving forward is truly through an RFP process. Last time I checked, it's never been done.
I have a comment. Thank you. Putting out an RFP is not on our agenda. Is that something that we can add, or in meetings that I've been to and that I've chaired, we go with what's on the agenda, and we didn't make any changes to that agenda before we started this, so I think we would need to concentrate on the original agenda.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Waite, you cannot on this agenda item make that change, but I would note that you already passed agenda item number 1, which included as one of the services the special city auditor meeting with an ad hoc committee that you have appointed to consider the possibility of putting out an RFP. So you've actually already taken that action. I believe that on this item, though, I'd like to ask the maker of the motion if you would include a dollar amount in the motion.
So I don't have any problem with the $2,500 increase request. I do also think it'd be appropriate to get a final accounting of how much monies were actually spent last year. I think that's where Councilman Johnson's coming from. There's $250,000 given last year, but no one knows how much was actually spent last year. And I'm not sure how that works under the prior contract or where we're at today. Maybe you can explain that better. I also just wanted to very formally, say I do support putting this out for an RFP, and there's no problem with that because you can always leave staff with direction to come back at a later date.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, you already have a provision in what I call the old contract that required a fourth quarter budget report. You've provided notice of termination of that contract. If there were monies that had not been expended in that year, then those monies are to be returned to you. So we're simply waiting for that information, and if there are monies from the $250,000 that weren't used for the budget items that were approved when that contract was approved, then they would be returned to you.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
Yeah, I'll move that we fund them at $20,000 to cover the cost of the music in the park, and then a significant increase, or at least an increase to cover the cost of cleaning the bathrooms associated with the music in the park before and afterward. At that point, I can't see funding anything else because I don't see them as essential services. If they really were, then the businesses themselves would take care of it.
Okay. So do we don't need any formal, within the motion, if I remake my motion, do I need to give direction to put out for an RFP?
No.
Yeah.
I'm just asking the question right now.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, at least it's my opinion that you already provided that direction and authorization in the approval of the special city auditor contract.
Okay. All right. Is there a second to the motion that's on the floor now?
Can I ask a question about that motion?
Yes.
Chris is just talking about $20,000, not the 30. Thank you, sorry. Chris is just talking about the $20,000, not the 37 that we were just discussing then. You're making a motion for $20,000. Okay.
I second the motion.
Okay. Mr. Mayor,
I want to make sure that there's enough money set aside for the cleaning of the bathrooms too. I don't know what that amount would be. Maybe it's $2,500.
This motion is like totally out of line. I mean, the motion has to do with approving this contract.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, again, may I ask, and I agree, what it's in front of you is the request by the chamber, is unless the chamber wants to offer to provide bathroom cleaning services, in which case you could include that. I think that if the intent was to, for example, have city staff look at augmenting the cleaning of the bathroom, that would be further direction to city staff. But I think that as I understand the motion is to provide $20,000 to the chamber, and if I understand the maker of the motion, and if you could please clarify, that $20,000 would be for the item identified, which is the music in the park for the remainder of the summer.
So it's the adoption of the contract, but with a $20,000 level of funding for the music in the park. I stand corrected, thank you. Plus a little bit more for the cleaning of the bathrooms.
No, Mr. Mayor, if I may ask.
You clean the bathroom.
If I may ask Councilmember DeJonas again, if that's his intent, he could certainly, as part of making the motion or discussion or after the motion, he could certainly ask city staff to look into augmenting cleaning the bathroom.
Happy to do that.
You would probably use, I don't know what funding you would use, but that's different than this contract. This contract would just be for one of the services that has been presented.
We already have a contract for services that clean the restrooms, so I'm not sure why this is part of the motion right now.
Mr. Mayor, I believe you and I are saying exactly the same thing.
Yes.
Okay.
I believe in clean bathrooms.
So I guess my other concern is that we took the time to try to negotiate some kind of fair interim funding for the chamber while we move forward with things. And so my concern now is that if we dramatically, change what was already kind of negotiated on good faith here, that we could generally agree on, that the chamber might not want to even engage at all.
And let it run its course.
What's the downside risk?
Does the motion still stand? Is the motion still on the table?
No.
I don't know.
Can I make a new motion then?
Make a new
Yes,
motion.
make a new motion.
I make a motion that we approve the budget as discussed with the $37,500 to include the educational classes as stated by by Charles.
I will second that.
It's been moved and seconded.
Councilmember Clark?
Yes.
Councilmember Waite?
Yes.
Dearness?
No.
Johnson?
No.
Mayor Toussaint?
Yes. Okay, with that, we'll move on to the contract with the Solvang Conference and Visitors Bureau, item number 3. I'll let some people leave the room.
You want-
Oh, you know, it is 8:30. No, actually, let's take a 5-minute bathroom break, yeah.
I think it's a
I used to be. I used to be svelte like you. By the way, 20 years ago.
All right, I'd like to resume the meeting. We have item number 3. Could we get a title report?
Item 3, contract with Solvang Conference and Visitors Bureau.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and I hope you don't mind that I'm going to now not try and look everywhere. I'm just gonna look at the staff report while I'm making this presentation. This item, and I'll try and be short since you had my full presentation about the chamber contract. The Solvang Conference and Visitor Bureau item that was presented to you on June the 24th had many of the same problems. You gave us the same direction. The contract in that instance, apparently the former city manager had sought to come up with a 4-year contract, but again, the contract language, I believe, had many of the same problems, and the presentation at your meeting on the 24th still lacked an actual budget that matched the amount that you all had appropriated. And so we needed to come back with this item with some structure to it. The mayor and I met with, and I'm going to thank the Conference and Visitor Bureau Board. They provided 2 subcommittee members very quickly. They also actually hired an attorney to help them with their negotiations. And so we met earlier this week. We worked on terms. We arrived at a point where they were unwilling to accept the 1-month termination provision that was in the pre-existing contract. And I think we had worked out everything else except for they didn't want the term that was, again, in the pre-existing contract. We received then a proposed contract back from their attorney, and I'm hoping that this ends up making a lot of sense since you're not receiving something else on the dais. What's in your agenda packet is the agreement as proposed by the SCVB, redlined only for the changes that Mayor Toussaint and I are recommending to the agreement as proposed by the SCVB. So I'm going to walk through those. So if you would go to the agreement that's actually in the agenda packet. Right. So at page 37, the first change is that they had proposed, and I frankly didn't understand this proposal. I believe they've agreed to this change, that rather than it being the entire city budget attached to this contract, what you have is instead the SCVB proposed 6-month budget. They are now proposing only 6 months of service rather than 12 months of service. They termed this contract as an interim transition contract, and in our discussions, they are willing to work with, looking forward to work with the city on discussions of what they were calling a transition period. Again, I think it's the same process we talked about where you have now an ad hoc committee that's going to look at the provision of services for the city by whatever agencies or agency ends up providing them. So this would allow for continued funding of the SCVB for a 6-month period, and then either you would extend the contract, you would have some new way of providing those services, you would do something else. But this at least gets you through the end of this year. Their stated reason for wanting to get through the end of this year is that they also put on Yule Fest, and they've already sold, I guess, a substantial number of tickets for Yule Fest, and they did not want the uncertainty about their putting on Yule Fest. So again, you have a detailed budget from them. You also have a detailed scope of services from them for that 6-month period. And I would note that in speaking with Mr. Widrow, he believes that the time period to appropriately go through a public process, which I think you very much want to do, to talk about and come up with potentially an RFP and have those further discussions about some potential replacement or reformation would take that 6-month period. The next item you'll see here in the red line is that I actually noted in anticipation that you might approve the contract that you have approved, that you would want the SCVB to be working with the special city auditor, and with that, and I called it here an ad hoc destination marketing subcommittee, and that you would want to make sure that they cooperate if there's a transition of services, including you would want to make sure that all intellectual property, all actual real property, and then any digital or intellectual property is transferred to the city. And so there's a provision in here specifically providing for that. As I understand, that's also acceptable to the SCVB. The next change, or changes, are at page 4 of 6. And they had proposed that our release from them and their agreement not to sue provide a carve-out so that they were not releasing you or agreeing not to sue for breach of contract. And I have to say, I truly don't understand that concept, since the only thing they would be suing you for would be breach of contract. And so I am very much recommending that you don't agree to that deletion. I've provided them with the draft where we are recommending that deletion, that their inclusion of the exception not be accepted. And so it is a broad release, and it is a broad agreement not to sue for all purposes, and I have not heard back from them about that. And with those changes, again, this is the contract that they have proposed. Again, it is a 6-month contract. Our recommendation is to remove the 1-month termination provision from the contract. It still has a termination for cause. If they're not performing, you could still give them notice. They would need to, in fact, perform within 20 days, and if they didn't perform within 20 days, then the contract would be terminated. I think that among the reasons why we're recommending that you go ahead and remove that one-month termination provision is that they felt, and I believe that the mayor and I agree, that there needs to be some level of certainty to get through Yule Fest. Thank you.
I have a question.
Okay. Are there any questions of the staff report?
I just want to have a quick question first. But all the previous contracts with the SCVB have had that 1-month termination contract clause in them, correct?
They absolutely have, and if you would like to put it back in,
So this is nothing new?
we can certainly put it back in. It would be nothing new.
All right.
So help me understand this Yule Fest thing. I mean, clearly we want to have a Yule Fest, and we want this to be over the top, excellent, biggest draw we can produce in terms of tourism and things of that nature. The problem I'm having with this is, and this is a big assumption here on my part, if we were to meet with the ad hoc committee and find and convince the council we want to take a different direction or move in a different path, and that includes bringing in a group that specializes in that kind of thing, wouldn't there be a conflict, because these guys are now committed to doing it, and yet the new entity, if it was tasked to do it, would not be able to do it, right?
Mr. Mayor, Council Member DeJernis, yes, I think that inherent in either approving or not approving this contract or making changes is either accepting or not accepting that for 2019, it would be the SCVB that is providing I'll call it the structure and support for a Yule Fest. Something close to my heart, having been Santa Claus at Yule Fest. I believe it was in 2015, and having my son also having been Santa. I'm still not going to tell you that you should do Yule Fest one way or the other. That is a policy decision for the council. I'm simply reporting this is what their request was, and the mayor and I believed that it was an appropriate item to present to you, as it would provide some stability for a 6-month period, which is what the special city auditor has said is needed to go through a public process for change.
And when is Yule Fest this year? Is it in early December?
I thought you were asking the month.
Actually, there's a real reason why I'm asking this.
Mr. Mayor, I have been Santa, but I have not memorized the dates of all Yule Fests.
But it's less than 6 months from now.
No, the question has more to do with, is it possible to put on 2 events? They can have their Yule Fest, which is great. Like, I think last year they did it at the very beginning of the month.
I think we're starting to leave.
Mr. Mayor, we are very...
Excuse me, hold on. I must maintain decorum. Please let me deal with this. I need to just keep you down to questions of the staff report. I'd like to move on unless any other...
Well, this has to do with, would there be a potential conflict?
Let's save it for any other deliberations you have during... Yeah, okay. Are there any other questions of the staff report?
Yes.
Okay.
So, with keeping them in the contract with their production of Yule Fest, one thing that did jump out at me is that we have the annual Christmas tree burn, which is part of it, which goes beyond December 31st. It goes into January. So I don't know if that is a material difference in the term of the contract or not, or if that's considered part of their Yule Fest.
Mr. Bear, and you may get further clarification when you open this up to the public, but my understanding is that what we're really talking about is a contract term that runs to December the 31st. And they have particular things that they want to make sure that they get to carry out as part of Yule Fest. As I understand it, and I don't know all the detail of Yule Fest, but as I understand, there are things which involve sales of tickets, and that's what they're trying to make sure does happen, and those things, as I understand, all happen within the 2019 year. So I don't know what happens with the Christmas tree burn. I think we would have to figure that out, and I would probably look to the special ad hoc committee for giving Christmas tree advice.
Okay. With that, we will, oh, you have a question?
Chip, I was just wondering if there was any, I noticed we received a document, everyone got this email regarding tax returns, and they have not filed their tax returns, I don't believe for 2017 or 2018. And I was looking at 2016, and it looks like it's not timely filed. So my only question is, what kind of ramifications does that have for the city, since we would be funding this entity that is obviously not in compliance with the government?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Johnson, I have to say that I have not delved into the detail. There was a requirement in what I'll call their old contract that carries forward in their new contract that they actually needed to be audited by the city and by the city auditor. And so I don't know if the city auditor did or did not perform that. It would seem like the city auditor, in performing an audit, would have caught that irregularity, those irregularities. I think that I would urge you to refer that to staff and perhaps to the special city auditor to provide us with a report back on that. And similarly to the chamber item, I would urge that we get their 2018-19 final budget reports before, and I'm going to make one slight exception with this, because you'll note there are 2 items here, unlike with the chamber. Mm-hmm. There is a recommendation for a contract, and there's also a recommendation that you go ahead and reimburse them for the expenses for their employee and other matters that they actually have incurred in the month of July. As I understand, there were actually people in the Conference and Visitor Bureau through the month of July. There were other staff. They actually did have expenses, and as I understand it, I'm going to look to David, but as I understand, they have provided the backup invoices for those particular expenses.
Yes, I believe so.
David, can you elaborate on that? I do believe that.
I'm trying to pull them up right now.
Okay.
I'm a little confused about the answer to Daniel's question. My understanding is that Dave's going to look into this?
No, I think the answer to Councilmember Johnson's question of the tax filings, if I understood the question correctly, I was starting to dive into finding my documents.
Well, I think it's pretty clear. Someone asked for a copy of the taxes. Took several weeks, and the filing date for 2016 was 3 days ago. Looking at the record that we have here.
That would be correct. Under the city's annual audit, the city's auditor in the CAFR also looked at their cash balances, which was provided previously to City Council, which I think a comment from Mr. Johnson then was that doesn't tell us much, and I would agree with that. So in terms of their, if I was starting to dig through my documents here trying to look for what I was anticipating, and so I do not have it in front of me. I want to clarify, was the question whether or not they have submitted a July invoice or that they have submitted support for expenditures in July?
I was referring to his question, not what you're describing. Are they in compliance? And if they're not in compliance, is that going to be an issue with respect to approving anything here?
As far as the taxes go?
That's part of it, yes.
That, I think, is a contractual question.
Or do we need to stipulate that they need to have them completed? Or, I mean, I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
I have asked in response to an email whether or not they have had any penalties for late filing, and was told no, they have not. But that
maybe their nonprofit has been revoked. We don't know. You know, that's my issue. They are a nonprofit that's supposed to be filing on time. So I'm just wondering. I'm wondering if the city's going to be held liable if we fund something that's, an organization that's not in compliance.
The organization would need to be in compliance. Again, I'm just learning. I read the old contract. It said that the city audited them. I know that there is some issue about the city has or is in the process of obtaining a new financial auditor.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, I would assume that new financial auditor would be auditing their books. If it is, and I would urge the council to open this for public comment, but if you are uncomfortable with the status of this organization, then you could, if you wanted to, simply fund on a going forward month-by-month basis. We suggested that to them, and they were not interested in negotiating a month-by-month basis going forward. However, I would note that, the odd thing about treating these really like contracts for services, usually you have much more of, an arm's length relationship. And in this instance, the contract even calls them, I forget the term, but it's like they are a part of the city. Mm-hmm. You have the same auditor. It's not a completely arm's length relationship. So you could offer them, in good faith moving forward, reimbursement based upon invoices provided until such time as they come into compliance with the audit requirements, and then this could return to you.
I have no more
Are there any other questions of the staff report?
No.
Okay. With that, I'll move out to public comment. Eugene Boyle is our first speaker, followed by Hans Deuce.
I covered what I wanted to, the remarks that I made.
I will pass. Hans Deuce.
Thank you, Leon. I'd just like to thank Ms. Waite for her comments made during the last session of the chamber. I appreciate that very much. Decorum is very important. We can all agree that tourism is what makes this town. If it was not for tourism, we would still be a municipal improvement district. Not enough tax base to run a city government. And if you want to see what that would look like, and I remember that, go out to the secondary streets of Las Olivas and San Ynez. We're spoiled here. Curbs, gutters, even sidewalks. Yeah, the main streets out there look good. There's still gravel out there, potholes. And that's just a little bit of it if you're a property of the county, especially not in Santa Barbara. So, tourism is a fickle thing. If you're in one moment, you're out the next. If you're not in the public's eye. When we started here, we were the only game in town, up and down the coast. Now there's attractions everywhere. We have a lot of competition. And, you defund or cut back funding for 6 months, a year, you might not feel it. But I'm understanding you're having a long-term expenditures coming down. And so you might have to make some significant reductions. Like I say, you're not going to feel it the first year, probably. But the further out you get in the reductions of promotion, the more you are going to feel it. And if you have to restart it, it's like inertia. It's going to take a lot more effort or money to restart a promotion campaign than just keeping it going to begin with. So think about this. Thank you.
Michelle Boyle.
Hello, Council and Mayor. Michelle Boyle, Solvang resident. I'd like to address the angry comments from the dais tonight about detractors being in the audience and all the supporters being out who aren't here at the meeting. It's quite insulting to be labeled that way. I'm a person who has not sent an angry letter. I have not made any negative comments. I've done a lot of reading. I've talked with a lot of my friends in the community. I've stayed interested and I've stayed connected. And I think it's very unrealistic for you to think that you're not going to have some strong opinions expressed. And I don't think that there's any way that you would have any idea who supports you, how many people are supporting, or how many people are really watching. And I would like our interactions to be respectful and not the labeling to stop. I would respectfully request that.
Lawrence Gerard. Sorry if I mispronounced that.
That's fine, absolutely fine. And I had a nice long speech. I understand 3 minutes is long. But we have the solution right here. Santa Claus, he can pay for everything. So that's my proposal. But the phrase, I am a producer and a music director for the Solvang Nativity Pageant, part of Yule Fest, this is a great town. This is the town that built the Festival Theater. I want to build everybody up here. This is a fabulous town, and there are solutions, and I pray that we find them, that you find them, and I trust you will. And I'm going to go into how good tourism is here. I'm not saying you guys aren't for tourism, because that would be insanity in this town. And I don't believe any of you are insane. Maybe the guy that thinks he's Santa Claus, but anyways, I wanted to get into rate of return because that was brought up. And we have been sold out for years now. And finally, last year, we were forced to go to Evite. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's an online reservation system for events. And as a result, we have data in solidly, because the Visitors Bureau they provide seed corn to us every year. They give us the money that allows us to put the down payment on the Festival Theater, which is a fabulous place, and do our insurance and get the ball rolling while we're still in the red, raising funds and getting everything going. We don't happen without that. So it's huge. But last year, and we do two events, one day. Maximum seating is 700. 1,400 is a sold-out year for us. And we've sold out for many years in a row. And last year, because of Evite, almost 1,100 of our reservations were from outside the area. We know that. And being very conservative in our estimates, okay, if there's 2.5 per family, and I'm going to do it at 1,000 because that's easier math for me, that's 400 rooms for 2 nights in this area. If only half of those are in Solvang, that's 200, rooms for 2 nights, so 400 rooms. And I know from when we had 1 year we had 3 members of the New York Metropolitan Opera here, and their rooms were $300. But I just estimated let's just say that they're the cheap rooms, $150, and I don't know where you're going to find that at Christmas season in Solvang. But if we estimated out that all the revenue from that and get back to just the bed tax or temporary occupancy, whatever the phrase is, bed tax. It comes out to $12,000 for the city of Solvang. And it starts with $1,000 from the Visitors Bureau. And like I said, it's seed corn. And I know you know this, but be careful, because if you don't plant the corn, there's no harvest. And I know, but all this funding and what you do with it, that's up to you. I'm not involved in that. I don't make any pretensions to have knowledge of what you have to do with everything. But I just want to say, we are firm believers in the Visitors Bureau, and we would not happen without them. Would we survive if they got drastically cut? Fortunately, in this valley, we're loved. And we're also known as the premier Christian Christmas event on the Central Coast. People come from outside the state, and we have that evidence. So I can give you a rate of return, and I challenge you to call your investment counselor, put $1,000 out in August or September, and it turns into $12,000 in Christmas. Only Santa Claus does that. Thank you.
I have a second speaker slip from the same organization, so I'm going to skip this one.
There you go, yes.
Okay. Jesse Verkler.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Jessie Verkler. I am, my parents own the Hamlet Inn, and I am part owner of the Outerdag Inn here in town. We just got approval for an extension of that building, so we'll be putting in 26 more rooms and doing a 33-room property here in Solvang, hopefully soon. I am also a member of the Board of Directors for the Solvang CVB and on the ad hoc committee that work with Chip and Tom and the mayor on the contract. I will have to backtrack a little bit on some of Chip's timeline in regards to our contract. We did meet and discussed a contract, and what was proposed to us was a 90-day contract. We went into it and said we couldn't do that because for a marketing agency, 90 days would be an irresponsible use of city funds. Marketing happens over a period of time, and so what we asked for was an extended period of time. We asked for a year contract. They informed us that that was not a possibility. So then we went back and proposed the 6-month contract so that we can continue on with a few sales conferences, Stomp, which happens in October, and then also Yule Fest, which happens for the whole month of December. So that was my understanding of the 6 months. We did also not receive the contract that you have before you. The red lines that are put into here was not part of what we had negotiated and agreed upon. And I did contact our lawyer to make sure that he didn't receive anything different than what we had gotten. And so at this point, for us, the contract prior to this was what we had discussed, or our ad hoc committee had brought forth to our board. And that was the contract we thought would be brought forth to this board. And so therefore, since it is not, I am here as a representative of our board to say that we would not be able to accept this even if you did. So what we propose at this point in time is to continue our renegotiations, and we would love to do it with the committee that you have formed to put something together that both boards would be able to agree upon. Thank you.
Ben Tolson. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you not put? Oh, I do have a second one from you. No, if you'd like to speak, you can speak.
I don't think I do, but I want to say a few words anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, Christmas runs from the first Friday in December all the way through the month. And it's a very important month for Solvang. The first 10 days of December is relatively slow because, people stay in their own towns for Christmas and do the holiday shopping and so forth and so on. But after the schools are out, Solvang gets very, very packed. And I'm sure it's going to be the same this year again. But we must make sure that live up to our expectations because, as you know well, the Solvang has been acclaimed as one of the better or one of the most beautiful Christmas towns in Solvang. It has been acclaimed by, I forget what newspaper it was, but we are way up there. So we need to keep that going for sure. So, and hopefully we will have a Christmas tree in there, and we ask the city to help to decorate the Christmas tree. And in addition to that, we also want to do the gazebo, make it nice, lit it up, and so forth and so on. So we are looking forward to that month. It's a very, very good month for Solvang, and let's keep it that way. And I'm sorry if I said that you don't support tourism. I know you also support tourism. Of course you do. You're all in this together. So I'm sorry if I said something wrong before. I'm sorry about that. But I know you will support tourism, and I know we will be successful if we stand together. Thank you.
Thank you. Kenny Lama.
Good evening again. For the record, ESCO, Solvang business owner. And I'd like to say that we are not against tourism. In opposite, we support tourism. But we want smart tourism with less cost, with more efficiency. It's time for a change. We don't want 2 million day trippers only spending $20 or less per person, only weekends. but it would be ideal having here around maybe 500,000 visitors spread in 7 days in a week to stay, to shop, to dine, to spend $500 or more per person. So let's work on smart tourism and keep taxpayers' money in the city's saving account for city's future. We are against wasting 20%, nearly 20% city's budget just on two incompetent and two ineffective organizations. Like most of the business owners, we do not benefit anything from them. Please don't give them hundreds of thousands of dollars on behalf of us. We really do not want that, and we do not need that. I'm sure there is some other better way that can be done for much less money by more professional organizations. There is another thing that as CVB engages in unfair, unacceptable competition with other retailers by selling water, postcard souvenirs in their visitors' kiosk. But those can be purchased from local businesses that has to pay rent, all other overheads. There is no visitor bureaus that there is competing with their local businesses. As CVB puts only a few events per year that attracts wrong crowds and only promotes selective businesses, are done only on the weekends when the town is already busy. They don't do nothing for midweek events to bring more people during the slow times. One of their events, Taste of Solvang, is duplicated with another event run by Visit Santa Ynez Valley, Taste of Valley. This event attracts mostly wrong crowd and brings noise, and most of those people hurrying to get drunk. No contribution whatsoever to the wine tasting rooms. They are the only one who makes the money out of it, so it's completely a fundraising event, in our opinion, do not benefit to the business owners. They sell tickets, they collect money, and tasting rooms has to give free wine to the ticket holders. You call this as a promotion, business promotion? The map they are giving away is very confusing. All downtown is about a few streets, but their map showing like a Manhattan. Their many services are duplicated or triplicated with other groups, all of these on the back of the rate payers. We are supposed to be Christmas town, but still we were celebrating with the plastic trees. What happened to giving to hundreds of thousands of dollars for the festival, and they are the one organizing Jewel Fest? Thank you very much.
It's good.
Thank you, Mayor Toussaint, Councilman. I do have a question for the attorney that as he reading the stack. In the new contract, does the city get at the end of 6 months or at the end of the contract get the property rights and intellectual property of the SCVB, or does that stay with the SCVB?
We can address that question later on.
Okay, but anyway, in regards to the discussion that's going on, I feel the SCVB is very important to the city of Solvang. Mr. DeJernis has commented that he would like to see 500,000 people coming to the city of Solvang instead of $1 million and spend $500 each instead of $200 to $250 each. Right now, with the city of Solvang, there are approximately 750 rooms in Solvang, from hotels down to B&Bs. We are looking at a 70% occupancy rate. If you figure up the 2 people per room, that comes up to just under 400,000 people a year. I came up with 396,000 something. So we're already halfway there. If we end up coming down to your 500,000, you are going to have a drop both in the overnight people and you will have a drop in the day trippers. If you have a 10% drop in the overnighters, you will have a minimum of a $450,000 drop in your TOT. And I say that a minimum because as the occupancy goes down, the hoteliers will have a tendency to drop prices to maintain their occupancy. To get that $450,000 back, you need a minimum of $40 million in additional sales to get that $400,000 back. And I don't know what you're going to do to get that kind of sales back. You can only get, with the motels we have right now, you can only get so much rent out of those motels because you have so many rooms, you have high end, you have intermediate, and you have lower end. And we have a good mix of it. If you go with a mixture of all high, you're even going to have a higher drop in your TOT. So what you need to do is look at the big picture for your funding. Don't cut your nose to spite your face to figure out where you're going to cut something to save $800,000 the first year and then all of a sudden go down the proverbial toilet in the years afterwards. Because as Mr. Dew said, the first year you aren't going to see it, but you go down 2, 3, 4 years, you will see a major drop, and it takes a lot of money to bring that back. I thank you very much.
David Rasmussen.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council people, David Rasmussen, Solvang. I would like to talk to you tonight about 3 things. 1, the history of the bed tax. 2, why tourist economy is important to people that aren't involved in the tourist industry. And 3, measuring how we are doing. So back about 50, 60 years ago, there was a group, this is number 1, the history of the bed tax. About 50, 60 years ago, there was a group of hoteliers in Santa Barbara County that wanted to advertise the region. So they thought, how can we do this? Well, the only way they could get 100% participation from all the hotels in the area, and this is way before Solvang was a city, was to create a tax. So they went to the county and said, will you collect this tax for us? And the county said, yes, we'll collect the tax, we'll administer the tax. The tax was, I think, 1 or 2%. And the county would take 10% of that 1 or 2% to administer the fund and then give the rest back to the advertising. Well, then fast forward to the 70s, Proposition 13 passed. Property tax stagnated. So the county's going, where are we going to find the money to fund these things that we need to fund? The bed tax. The bed tax, the mistake the people made when they formed the bed tax was they had to go into the general fund. So the county could take that money that was made for advertising, strictly for advertising, but now it runs the city. So you really stolen the bed tax money. Okay, so that's the bed tax. Why would somebody who lives here and has nothing to do with tourism, why is tourism important to them? Maybe they work in Santa Barbara, maybe they made their money elsewhere and have been fortunate enough to retire here. They don't need the tourist dollar. Yes, they do. Without the tourist dollar, we wouldn't have the hospital. We wouldn't have the Festival Theater. We wouldn't have the YMCA. I wouldn't be buying building materials to remodel my bathroom. We wouldn't support the AYSO or the dance groups to the level that we do. Tourism is key here. It's our industry. So it's really important that we not mess with this too much. If we make mistakes, it's a long way to correct. Ryan, give me 2 minutes. 3, how do we measure this? In 6 months, you really can't. There's too many variables. It's 104 degrees this week. The 4th of July was on a Thursday. That's great. 4th of July is on a Saturday, not so good. The price of gas went up. The price of gas went down. How do you measure what the money we put out there, how do you measure what that does? You can't. So I respectfully ask that you tread on this with care. You're messing with my livelihood. Please be careful.
Okay. And then, so Robert, did someone ask you to read this? No? Okay. Pass that. Fred Colville.
City and council members, Fred Koval. You know, I heard about the Christmas tree ever since I came to town in 1980. The Christmas tree has gone from being very big and died, to very little and died, to medium size and died, to fake, to don't like it, because it's a fake, it's just a bunch of lights strung up that look like a tree or shaped like a tree. And still today, it's still going on. When are we going to get a real Christmas tree? I hope someday.
Ask Santa.
So, you know, it's been ignored for too long to diversify, to have other revenue sources, to try just baby steps to get going on that. The fiber optics was put in a few years ago. Is it really being utilized? Could it be utilized? Should the city be looking into how can we utilize that to bring in another revenue source? Some kind of a smokeless industry. It's just begging to be done. People want to get out of the San Francisco and that area south of there, or out of the LA area. They'd love to have this semi-rural area to work in. It needs to be looked into. Now, let's talk about what we're doing here. You know, let's talk about what we're trying to accomplish, where we're trying to go in the next 6 months or 3 months. And that is, Solvang needs a new direction. It needs to become an adventure destination. It needs a new spin. It needs an orthogonal movement. It needs to be a center for adventure activities. I've broken this down. Enhancing downtown. Reintroduced the Danish dress ceremonial sidewalk sweeper maids. It was around here 15 years ago at the beginning. We had young girls dressed in the Danish costumes, and they had brooms, and they stood on the corners, and what they did is provided information. Plus, they were a nice accent for the city. Bring it back. You guys talked about it for years. Turn the eastern block, one block of Copenhagen Drive, into a walking mall. Lights overhead. Do it right. One block, because the second block is hard to get to in some of the areas from the backside. Emphasize Danish products. Evaluate parking locations. Evaluate the current bus location. It's tired. It's a place that's complicated. Beyond downtown, the Vets Hall utilization, the costs. No breaks for residents in the city. Horrible costs. $2,500 just to get into it. And you can't even get into it till 10 o'clock on Saturday. How can anybody put on a festivity on a weekend where they want to start at 2 o'clock and they're trying to get the place dressed up in 4 hours? It just doesn't work. Beyond Lot 72 development, you know, that's been and gone. One more minute, please. Why? RV park for vehicles. How about being horse trailer friendly? Adventure activities. Parks and Rec should be into adventure activities. Sponsor hiking, river mountains, day trips, overnight hikes. How about sponsor biking? Timing events on Refugio Road to the top of the mountain. CrossFit does it all the time. Sponsor CrossFit contests. areas around the city. We never talk about the airport. How can the city utilize the airport? And finally, we need to address, and it's as old as the hills, traffic flow. When are we going to take some baby steps? And an alternate route so that we don't further congest Mission Drive, an alternate route for a bike trail
Okay. Fred, I'm
on
gonna tell-
Tullamope
we
and
gotta wrap it
Cottle
up.
Creek. Two more.
No, I'm sorry. I got it. It starts, I gave it with one person, then every person wants it. We'll be here all night long.
Yeah, but
so.
I'm the last one.
No, you're not the last person, so. Please don't clap. Nancy Orchard. And I'm sorry, Nancy, I just noticed that you had on your slip to speak on the chamber item too, but unfortunately I'm trying to juggle between those that insert individual slips and.
I next?
But yes, you are, yeah. I'm just apologizing for missing yours earlier.
My name is Nancy Orchard, and I'm a resident here in Solvang on Old Mill Road. These are some thoughts that I want to share with you that are very personal to me. My husband and I have lived here for 47 years, and I have participated in your city government, as has my husband. So there's some history to some words I have to say tonight. The Chamber and the SCVB is the biggest elephant in the room for the current drama that the city is having and the hidden agendas that have run throughout Solvang for too many years to count. Measure Z, the TOT measure increase, was sold to the voters as something to support the community. The measure was not run as a special tax that would require more than 50% of a vote. Rather, it was run as a general tax, requiring just 50% to pass and allowing the tax increase to be used for anything that the city deemed proper. Since then, the prior councils dramatically increased spending on tourism, marketing, benefiting these special interest groups, and now making up 15% of the discretionary budget. The special interest councils of the past also did other things to benefit their own personal interests and those of commercial enterprises. In 2011, the SCVB and the Chamber aided a prior city council in reducing water rates for commercial users while increasing the rates for residents. This inequity continues to this day. In 2018, the council also launched a trial balloon for annexing more land into the city for development purposes. To be sure, the prior council gave a record number of monies to tourism, lobbying, leading up to something Solvang has not seen in a long time: a competitive election with residents. There was, just a couple moments, if you don't mind, there was a clear split between those who participated or approved of the record giveaways to the special interest agencies and those that did not. The Chamber and SCVB supported the candidates who would continue to fund them and tried stopping those who would not sign on the dotted line. The challengers and most of this current council ran on platforms of fiscal responsibility. That is why we are here tonight. For funding the SCVB to go from 400,000 to over 800,000, and the chamber going from 16,000 to 85,000 to 300 to 250,000 in less than 3 years is astonishing. These numbers are simply unsustainable when the city is also facing into huge capital projects such as the costly wastewater treatment plant. To be sure, many of the commercial sectors will just advise repeating the state water debacle by having the residents pay either in terms of higher water rates, higher sewer rates, or a special property tax. I implore this council to make the changes today to stop the misuse of taxpayer monies and take care of all of the residents and businesses in the community, not just a select few of the vocal group who have run our government behind the scenes for years. Of course, they are screaming now and very upset, making all kinds of nefarious claims as they lose control of their long-lived stronghold. But it's time for big changes in how this city treats all of the citizens and spends all of its monies. Thank you.
I'm sorry, please no clapping. All right, so that's the end of the speaker slips I have. With that, I'll take this back to the council for discussion and action. Chip, I believe Jessie Verkler is the representative for the SCVB here. I think she should be afforded the same time to just address any concerns with regard to the contract, such that we did for Charles Warner earlier.
Sure, but yeah, I need to, because I feel like I'm living in an alternative universe. We had a fairly long meeting with the SCVB subcommittee, their executive director, and their attorney. And we did initially talk about shorter-term contracts. They advised us that they were not willing to discuss shorter-term contracts, that it needed to be for a full year. We being Special City Auditor Widrow and I, we had to take a break because we had spent several hours already, and I had a couple of other things we had to do, but I left some suggested markups to a contract with their attorney. He said that he would then look at those and be available for further discussion that afternoon. Tom and I went back to his office that afternoon. We had made what I thought were essentially acceptable changes to present both to you and for them to present to the SCVB board. When we went back and met with him, he advised us that he could not present to the SCVB board a contract with a 1-month termination period. And we had a very long conversation. I have to say, I ended up feeling uncomfortable with that conversation. So I went to the SCVB board the next day. Mayor Toussaint attended that meeting, and Mr. Widrow attended that meeting, at which I presented to the board our explanation for the need to retain the language, which again has been in there, as I understand. It was in there in what I've been referring to as the old contract. I was told, I haven't been here officially that long, but I was told that it was in contracts before that. We presented that to the SCVB board. I believe that was on Wednesday of last week. I then got an email from their attorney saying that he was having a meeting with the subcommittee and their executive director. And then I received a copy of the contract, which is in your packet, but without my red line changes. he told me that that's what was going to their board on, I believe, Thursday. As I recall, they actually had back-to-back special meetings. I was not able to attend their meeting on Thursday. I received from him, I believe it was on Friday, then a copy of that contract, which was signed by a representative of the SCVB board. Now, in my usual experience, that's not a way to typically negotiate a contract, to present something unilaterally to your funder. And I'm doing this, I'm sorry, I'm trying to be incredibly, not objective in this. But where it sounds like we are now, I should finish, I then looked at that. The mayor and I met. We talked about that. We made changes that allowed us to be comfortable presenting a version of that contract, a 6-month contract, to you all. And I actually sent some emails to their attorney to get some clarification, which were copied to the entire group. With that clarification, I sent to him a revised copy, which is exactly what's in your packet. I received an email this afternoon asking for my cell phone number, which I provided, and then I didn't get a phone call. I'm somewhat at a loss, but as far as I can tell where we are right now, and I heard the request was to continue negotiations to arrive at something else. Again, that's sort of where we started last Tuesday, was let's have an interim contract and then be able to negotiate and figure out exactly what it is that the SCVB would do with more input and opportunity for the city to review that. So in many ways, I'm now hearing a request which is essentially what we asked and were told no to. So I would ask if the representative could better explain to us what they're now asking, that would be great.
Jesse, you may approach.
What we're asking, from my understanding, is that, as you said, the contract that is in your packet with your red line was not received to where we were able to, as an ad hoc committee, meet and then present to our board. My understanding at the beginning in regards to the contract negotiations was that we would have some members of our board and you would have members, and we would negotiate a contract that we can then decide to present to our boards. So that is what we did. We thought that the contract prior to this version was what you would be presenting here, and so therefore it was the contract that we presented to our board. If I misunderstood that, I apologize, but that was my understanding. And so therefore, for us, it's not a contract, that the one that you have in your packet wasn't one that we as a subcommittee presented to our board of directors. And so to be responsible to the actual nonprofit, I wouldn't be able to say that we would be able to sign that. That's just what I'm saying.
And Mr. Mayor, and I don't mean to take up extra time. I don't know that it's completely productive here right now. I kind of think we need to go back. Again, we were presented with something absolutely unilateral, already signed, which was the first time I'd ever seen it, and yet I got it signed.
The one that we signed was one that we had agreed upon and had green lines and red lines, and I can talk to our attorney and have him send all of that information to you all.
I think where we're miscommunicating is the fact that you had decided it was acceptable and had approved it.
As a board. We decided as a board, and so therefore then you guys would get the chance to decide as a board as well. But what we decided as a board, we were under the impression that it was also going to be what you would be deciding on. But the contract you have in your packet was not what we decided as a board to accept.
So
I would just say, nor is it anything that was presented to us prior to receiving it as a signed version of a contract.
And I'm sorry, I'm just trying to follow. This is getting a little complicated. So, can I just, is this a difference between what the board, I know they had 2 special meetings, the SCV. Is this a difference between what their board said is okay that they're willing to negotiate to and the recommendation of the city attorney? Or
is it apples and
But
oranges?
if I understand, again, we negotiated a proposed draft contract. That was not only not acceptable to their board, but as I understood it, their attorney and their executive director did not even want to present it to the board because of, that's what I was told. Again, we went to the board meeting. After their initial board meeting, we received something which was not in line with what we had originally even discussed. And then the next day, we received that same thing signed. So we never had any discussion or negotiation about that second thing. When I received it as signed, we then reviewed the signed thing, and what you have is a red line version to what they sent back to us signed with our recommended changes. I don't know, again, it's a different, I would say it's just a difference. We didn't actually negotiate this.
I do believe Jack has versions of your recommended changes, and then the ones that you have here that you've presented to the council are additional recommended changes that we did not see. So therefore, for us, again, I'm just speaking on behalf of the CVB. For us, it's along the lines that we are unable to accept this current contract. If you all sign it, that's fine, but we won't be able to sign it because it's not something that, so what I'm requesting is that we go back to the table with your ad hoc committee and continue negotiations.
And I don't believe that there's any value in doing anything other than that.
Night.
okay.
Jesse, I would just ask that we do it with you all and that we arrive at something that can be presented to both boards before it gets presented to one and signed and sent like it's a fait accompli. Thank you.
So then it would be brought back before the city council again.
And I don't know what their budget situation is between now and August the 12th. I think that, again, Mr. Mayor and Council, this has been an extraordinarily odd one because I don't know whether, in fact, the city has audited their reports for 16, 17, 18, 19. I simply don't know.
I could respond to that.
Sure, that would be great.
So the Solvang CVB has been audited annually. And then in regards to the taxes, 16 was filed, and then 17 and 18 do have extensions that have been filed as well. So there is no penalty. But the Solvang CVB has been audited annually.
How was 17 extended beyond its extension date?
That I'm unclear about. I can get back to you on that information, but that I'm unclear about.
And then the audits, do we have copies of those audits and who performed the audits?
The city should have all of the copies.
The city
We've been
performed the
very
audits?
open with all our funds and worked directly with your finance people.
Okay, we're starting to lose control.
Signed.
So, thank you. David, do you have anything to add to that? I thought that when you showed me the audit reports you had, it seemed to me like nothing had even been done, but maybe
No, the city's CAFR, under the city's audit, does look at the CVB. So in the fiscal year 2017-18 CAFR, the CVB was audited under the city's provisions. There was a whole host of items that were in basically checklists that the city's auditor was reviewing. What we don't have, which I'd provided to you, to the mayor, were any supporting documentation that proved that those items had been reviewed. It seemed it was just a fiscal audit of cash flows in and out. We have looked at profit and loss statements that the CVB has provided. The last statement, or they're sort of colloquially called audits, but it's sort of the monthly invoices. Even though we pay on a quarterly basis per the old agreement, we would pay on the front end of the quarter so that they could provide the services in that quarter, and then monthly would provide, basically the supporting documentation for that. The last we have received was the period ending May of this year, and we've not yet seen the June, which would be then the final closeout.
So I'm just confused because I have a copy of one of the audit reports that you provided me, and each item, it says task completed, yes or no, and every one of them is blank.
That's what I'm referring to, is the
So then
spreadsheets that were.
How are you saying an audit was done?
I'm saying that our prior auditor, Terry Krieg, provided those spreadsheets that were what I believe to be checklists of items to review. I agree that it does not show in that checklist or any documentation we have from Mr. Krieg that it was that those forms were followed. If you look in the CAFR.
So just to be very clear, you have nothing that suggests that the auditor actually completed the audit,
other than in the CAFR, it shows the line
that
items.
anything could be put in there.
In the CAFR he
Okay.
does.
So there's nothing substantiating that the auditor actually completed an audit. That yes or no?
That we have the documentation on. Correct.
So then an audit was not completed as far as I'm concerned.
That's, yeah.
Okay, I just want to get straight to the bottom of it because it's not clear here. All right. Are there any other questions? Okay, with that, we'll take this back to the Council for Discussion and Action.
I don't think we have any discussion. I think it goes back to
The
you
action is
and
back to the table.
Chip to discuss it. And
Based on the advice of the city attorney, I would suggest that you just table this item until a future council meeting.
And that's, I guess, where we're at.
Thank you.
Do we need a motion?
No, you can simply
Direction.
directly be titled.
Okay. All right. With
Do you-
that,
do you- well, let me check. Do you want to provide direction back to the city attorney that they continue the negotiations with the CVB as they have been down the path on? I'm seeing consensus on nods for that direction.
Absolutely, but with a stipulation.
Again, I would,
Hold on,
actually like to ask that we get the audit,
Yes,
the materials for.
stipulation with completed audits.
Right, absolutely. And then maybe do a month-to-month strategy with them until that's completed.
I'm sorry, Daniel, let's one at a time. Can you turn on your microphone?
I would just love to know how that's a possibility, and maybe it is. I've never heard of it, but it could be. So I'm interested to know that.
Well, I mean, I'm just looking at it. Tax returns were requested. We have a copy of the tax returns. It took weeks to provide it, and they were just completed 3 days ago. We're looking at audits that the city supposedly did that are, to me, pretty obvious never happened. Quite frankly, I lose all faith in even our CAFR. We're now putting stuff in our annual financial report that we're claiming that we audited. And what I'm seeing here is the auditor never even did his job. By the previous council. By the previous,
Exactly right, I agree.
Yes, and you guys did move to terminate that auditor's contract.
For good reason, right?
Wow.
Yes, for good reason.
Yeah, big can of worms. Okay. I guess you have your direction. Thank you. With that, we are adjourned.
Thank you for your help.